spoken, then the next person will be called in transition, and they'll be in line, so we can try to keep this moving forward the fastest we can and to get as many people covered tonight. If we do not get everything covered, we will not make a decision tonight if the board wants to wait till our next board meeting. So we'll go through our normal process as we entertain this application. And the first process is to make sure everybody was notified with the green cards or affidavits.
We're missing two adjoining landowners that were not notified within the 10-day postmark.
What's their names?
J.D. Austin.
Is JD here? Okay. The next person?
And Ivan Miles.
Yes, sir. Ivan's here. Ivan, you didn't get the 10-day notice. Do you want to go ahead and proceed with this, or do you want to wait on so you can get your 10 and we table the meeting till next? Go ahead. Go ahead. Yes, sir. He was waving. So the only other person.
I did not receive notice, and I'm adjoining property. Kenny Stewart, 7160 West 900 South, Bass, Indiana, 47147.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Kenny Stewart, 7160 West 900 South, Nav, Indiana, 47147.
Give us a minute. Looking on it,
yeah. Patrick. They hear that address? Yeah. So regardless of, I was saying if you heard. Yeah, but if he's here, I don't think.
900 South is what I heard. I didn't hear all of it.
Oh, yeah, and said whether he's objecting. Or whether he needs. Sure. Yeah, I know we talked about that before as far as attendance. If he's here, he's waiting. He's here to. Yeah. I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what Amanda's doing. See the busy day.
I think so. Yeah.
I was physically going.
She's
Waivers or consents or proofs of notice to them. So, the Bowen case, it says that by proof of notice to them, that's what you should say. Am I around Bowen?
Yeah, we're
Oh,
I went that way.
that.
I went that way.
Isaiah.
I never installed it.
When I
was trained, yeah, Caleb is my 8-year-old. He was playing over there now.
Oh, 6.
Where is it?
91671.
I just wrote that thing straight down where it's.
mentioned like how you teach classes. You mentioned like how you teach classes.
No.
Oh, that was it.
So I don't know what I would have said that.
You're done with the class or teaching something.
No.
I can't. I should have brought my iPad.
Sure did.
Oh, I think maybe what you. I don't know if I would have said anything about this, but we provide one of the services that we do is we provide training for other solar developers on vegetation
Okay.
establishment management. It's like a couple of weeks we have our next big one coming up with a solar developer.
Training, basically.
Yeah, so that many of the vegetative outcomes that are less than desirable on some of these sites, they kind of all, there's some common themes as to why they have others aren't.
I don't know for sure.
Specialists, you know, they don't need to be, but if you can. Here's how you prevent that.
Yeah.
Probably it would have been, maybe we do a bunch of those kind of trainings.
Good specialists. I think it's even in my presentation, I say that pollinators, train vegetation choices is on the lower spectrum of flammability.
Can be, or it, I mean, if it wasn't designed right, it could.
It'd have to be a very, very dry summer. And so that's one thing I say, and also the reason I say it's a fire prevention measure is because it's not. I mean, in Kansas they had a certain sagebrush or something that was extremely weird, but also with pollinators like clover, for example, they provide drainage, so it's not like a muddy surface. If a truck were to go around, they have good absorption of the rainwater, and also it's a strong environment. Those are two things that pollinators often make sense. Glad you. I've seen that before. And I haven't much resistance to that idea.
Yeah. So there's lots of different bugs, you know, different things. If somebody wanted to go down the seed mixture, that could be a very different kind of a seed mixture that already seed mixture design that. Those are invasive plant species.
May I speak during discussion?
Can we
May I
speak
speak
to
during
this?
discussion?
We have a motion and a second. We will have discussion. You're more.
Yeah, may I, would you like to go?
Name and all the
Sure.
good stuff.
Thank you all. First off, Justin Endress, attorney, Youngland Endress Craft, 126 West Spring Street, New Albany, Indiana. I'm representing the applicant. Thank you. Can you hear? All right. Is this better? Yeah. I'm representing the applicant, and this one parcel that we're talking about, so Rule 4.3 of the BZA rules talks about the notice to the adjoining landowners. First, I just want to get out of the way that this isn't an adjoining landowner. There is a deeded separate fee simple parcel that is owned by Clark County, but that's the adjoining landowner. That person was noticed. That parcel is along the right of way, but it is not the right of way. In fact, I brought the deed today. It's subject to that right of way. And it's a separate deeded parcel that they paid for, which would not have been done if it were the right of way. And that's been deeded to Clark County for a lot of years. We noticed it at that proper address. So first off, the adjoining landowner was noticed in this case. We sent out 240 plus or minus notices. And, this is the one we're talking about. We also provided notice pursuant to the statute, which is the required statutory notice posted in the paper. And we've submitted the affidavit. I have that affidavit of publication here as well. In addition to that, when there was questions raised, we also did send certified notice to this address, albeit within 5 days and not 10, because again, our position is this isn't an adjoiner, but out of a caution and abundance so that we didn't have to continue a meeting, we sent notice. In addition to that, we can put on testimony that we've spoken to the person, notified them personally of the meeting, and given them verbal in-person notice of that meeting. So I hate to have everybody have to come back. Everybody is wanting to do that. I think not only the statutory, but the BZA notice, we do know they have actual notice and they've received it in several different ways. And I know there's, like I said, they're not actually an adjoiner, but out of an abundance of caution, we noticed it. So I do have the deeds here that, again, it's a meets and bounds description of the adjoiner.
Can you share that with our attorney?
Got a volunteer fireman in here.
Attention breaker.
Yeah. Not for it. That was right.
I got enough of that when I was in school. That's why they call it school.
Okay, so this issue came up sometime earlier this week in regard to, there are certain parcels that are in Clark County, sort of at the south end of the proposed area. And what council's referring to is that the Marble Hill Road, which separates the described property from some other properties, is also Clark County line. And then just south of that, there are these long, thin parcels that go directly along the roadway, along Marble Hill Road. And they are separately parceled to Clark County as a separate parcel land. And then what's presented here, and I would suggest at some point will be part of the board record, are copies of deeds that do appear to be in proper form and do appear to be for the areas described. The trouble is that in evaluating it, so the Board of Zoning Appeals rules, when it defines who an adjoining property owner is, such that an adjoining property owner should have notice, it specifically says that an adjoining property owner is a property owner, even if there's a right of way between you and the property. So if parcel A is making an application, and then there's a road, and parcel B is on the other side of that road, our rules, the Board of Zoning Appeals rules, say that parcel B is still an adjoining owner, even if there's the right of way. The parcels that are shown on Elevate or GIS, again, are these long, thin parcels along the road. These deeds do say subject to the right of way, and so it is, the deeds at least seem to be distinguishing these thin parcels from the right of way itself. But again, in evaluating this issue prior to today, it was not at all clear that what those pieces of property were, whether they are Clark County's establishment of control over their half of the road and their half of the right of way and their ability to expand on that right of way, or whether it was intended for some other purpose other than right of way. So the dilemma is that as council has indicated, the statutory notice requirements are publication notice requirements, and I don't think there's an issue there. I think everybody recognizes that under Indiana code, there's a statutory requirement for notice, which happens to be a publication. That has been met. Then the county, by the board's own rules, establishes additional notice requirements, and that's where the 10-day individual notice to all adjoining property owners comes in. And these Clark County parcels, that again, the outstanding issue is whether or not they're considered adjoining. Our rules say they are adjoining property if all that separates them is a right of way. Sounds like council's argument is that there's more than a right of way because there's this, again, narrow strip that belongs to Clark County that is right along the road between these disputed parcels and the road itself. I don't think there's a disagreement that some notice has now been provided, but it's less than the 10 days. So the issue becomes if the board proceeds with the petition, then, and if the property owner who did not receive the 10-day notice were later then to object to the having gone forward without the 10-day notice being provided, it would be up to a court in the future to make a decision about A, whether or not it is in fact an adjoining property owner pursuant to our rules who would have been entitled to notice, and B, whether or not the notice that was provided was sufficient such that the person should have had notice and should have participated. So those would be open-ended issues that would have to be decided potentially by a court if there were an objection raised and if that were pursued.
So these wouldn't, that person that we're talking about and discussing. No, it's
J.D. Austin.
J.D. Austin. Should he have been notified with what you're seeing there?
So again, if all that separates the Austin property from the petition property is a right of way, then yes, you should have been noticed. If in fact there is an intervening parcel, meaning that there's another landowner in between Austin and the petitioning party, the petitioning land, then no, that would not be considered joint land. The issue here is difficult because there is a deeded parcel between Austin and the land that's being petitioned on. The deeds have just been provided, and the deeds do reference subject to the right of way, which seems to indicate that the parcel, the small, thin parcel of land that Clark County owns is separate from the right of way. But then if you actually look at the map, it runs all the way along the road as if it were, in fact, potentially part of the right. So prior to today, I had issued an advisement indicating that in my review, it appeared to be that Clark County had taken that land as the right of way. then this makes it more murky because the deeds that have been provided today say subject to the right. So it's, I mean, it's a hair split.
All right. Any other questions or discussion?
I will say just one comment to that, that your rules contemplate amending or clarifying your rules if you prefer to do that as well. And so I think you certainly could. This isn't the statutory notice. It's
I
short.
have your maps here. Do you have it listed on these maps? Show it to us.
Yes, so the Clark County parcel was noticed, and I was just saying the BZA's rules at the end have, you can't amend your rules. And this is not a statutory notice issue, it's a BZA notice issue. We think it's been satisfied. The council has indicated that, the deeds are murky, but I think it is, there's clearly an adjoining parcel. And, again, that's why we submitted the deeds. But I'm just suggesting if you want to clarify or amend your rules on that, you're welcome to do that. Let's see what it is. Yes. Yes, so the properties in Clark County, if you pull those out, we're looking for them over here. The question was, can we see where it is?
Yes.
Somebody else?
It's David.
Well,
Might have done the chat.
Hey, Justin, it's only the red, right?
Yeah. He said, those landowners.
Let's try to find it on the map.
Just because they didn't show up. They should point that out. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Seeing that it could be potentially impactful. Mr. Austin said, I don't care.
Yeah.
Right away.
It sure is interesting. What?
It's such a tiny little.
We're not saying until 10 o'clock.
Yes, but if the strip, well, they're saying the strip is in Jefferson County. Yeah.
Street, they're saying that.
So I applied for there.
Yeah, it would be.
And it was actually
Do they have a chest?
one of the easier connections for places. I only had 2 connections. I got in at 11. Sometimes I get in at midnight, 1 in the morning. I don't fly out tomorrow until 10.
We've got solar panels on our house.
I'm
Wow.
like, you can get to 7:30.
Where do we go?
Save on your.
I'm way upstate.
People we bought them for went out.
Unbelievably upstate New York.
About a year after we
Oh.
got them, but,
Yeah, I'm like practically Canada.
So if anything ever happens to them,
More
I
than
don't
you
know
would
where to
think,
live. But yeah, they
Well, they said they've gotten them a lot better.
I feel like I should
Upstate
say,
New York is like, from what I understand, like
Solar sales out in.
yeah. I live right, I could,
Sales does it take?
my house I grew up in, I could walk 2 miles north, jump into a river and swim half a mile.
cut our bill about.
I'll say Lower Canada instead of
Paying on the solar
upstate
panels.
New York.
How many years does
Yeah.
it take?
I drive to Syracuse and then
Oh, it'll be a lot. It'll be a lot.
usually gets me where I
If we
want.
ever sell the house, they'll have to take over payments because I don't
Really?
imagine we'll have it paid off by the time we die.
to come to a meeting like this anyway. I said,
$30,000.
Really?
oh,
But
that-
at that
For 12
time,
panels.
the state of
I
Indiana,
know.
maybe it was a federal thing, they were giving you 10% back.
Yeah.
So we got 10,000 off.
Yeah.
If that's their legal counsel,
Yeah.
give them.
I don't know, it's probably dumb to do that.
Now, do you have,
We don't have any that we know of what to do with. It's just-
I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah.
I know.
Here I have it written.
You'll get an electric bill.
yeah, you still get electric bill. What it produces goes back into the line, it takes it off your bill.
I guess,
Through Nebraska quite a bit. I love it. I've been to Omaha a few times.
Well, let me tell you, the interstate, which is what you probably traveled
90.
on, is not the most picturesque part
Part of Nebraska.
representation
I
of the state.
would have to pull up
I really like going.
the other issue is
I I lived on the West Coast a couple times. Both times, I would drive across country, and usually I think from both LA and from Seattle.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Hoffman. I'm a senior project developer with Orion Renewables. Tonight, we plan to go over in depth the Idlewild Solar Project proposed in Saluda Township. I have a number of colleagues with me, as well as experts here, to give you all the details about the proposed project and answer any questions. We have a presentation agenda where we're going to go through the introduction, project overview, environmental, health and safety, property values, the application, and some closing statements.
Is this the same presentation as the information session?
No.
Is it the same hour long?
Uh,
I was just wondering, is there a time limit on speaking at these meetings at all?
Not for the applicant.
Not for the applicant, okay.
Now I'd like to introduce the team that we have here. Myself and my colleague Justin Wolf, Dan Marshall with Kinley Horn, Rich Kirkland with Kirkland Associates, Chris Sandifer, an independent engineering consultant, attorney Justin Endress with Young, Lind, Endress and Kraft, attorney Mary Soliday with Denton's, Brian Stump with Stump Consulting, Pete Berthelsen with Conservation Blueprint, and Ken Polisky with RSG. I would now like to quickly introduce Orion Renewables and who we are. Orion has been in business since 1998. We've been pioneers in the renewables in the US as well as Indiana. We're a privately held company that has developed over 1,150 megawatts of wind and 750 megawatts of solar in Indiana. Orion owns and operates one of the first wind farms in Indiana. Now I'd like to introduce the project overview. We're going to go into project steps. We are currently in the permitting stage of the project. When land use approval is obtained, then we move into completing final design and working with the potential power purchaser. We do not build on speculation. The project only gets built if a purchaser has signed a power purchase agreement. That process can take a lengthy amount of time after land use approval and other federal and governmental permits are obtained. Project history. Oh boy, really touchy, sorry. We began out in the area with local outreach to the landowners back in 2019. This process takes a number of years to have the land come together in a way where a project is feasible. We have developed partnerships with local businesses, schools, volunteer fire department, and others. We introduced the project to surrounding residents in Saluda Township in July of 2024 by going door to door and asking if they'd heard about the project and what questions they may have. We submitted the application July 1st of this year, and last month we held a Solar 101 presentation with the assistance of the county commissioners. Moving to slide 11, if you guys are following along with the binders. Sorry, I didn't, oh, thank you. Whoever passed those out to the board, I apologize. The name Saluda comes from the Native American name that means river of corn. Some might say a solar project is taking farmland out of production. However, it's very similar to putting farmland into a CRP program, which still under the USDA is considered farmland. The river of corn will be flowing in a much healthier way after approximately 1,800 acres of farmland sits fallow and regenerates its productivity over the life of the solar project. Corn is the largest agricultural crop in the US, but it also comes with impacts to the surrounding community and environment. The landowners who signed with this project know the environmental impacts of farming in regards to air and water pollution, and now live with the impacts of years of exposure. This includes running tractors, noise, cultivation of land, dust, and application of fertilizer, insecticides, and pesticides. The excess nitrogen and fertilizer, as well as insecticides and pesticides, can be washed away into waterways or released into the atmosphere. This heavily contributes to the problem of air pollution and negative health impacts facilitated by farming. Contradictory to what some might think, 35 to 50% of corn goes to ethanol. 50% of beans goes to biofuel. So these agricultural fields in Saluda Township already produce energy to run our cars and tractors for our gas tanks. So the operation of the solar project is just another form of energy production. Now, I'm not saying that farming is bad by any means. But I am trying to make the parallel that all land uses have impacts. And just because the use of these properties may change temporarily while the solar project is in operation, doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. This proposed solar field will offer that land and the surrounding residents a chance to cleanse and regenerate, as well as the neighboring fields to increase productivity with less competition. The capacity of the project is power for approximately 41,000 Indiana homes, with approximately 3,890 acres of land leased. Roughly half of the leased land for the project is inside the fenced area, about 2,000 acres. And the other half is being preserved as its current use, woods, wetlands, setbacks, etc. As stated in our application narrative, approximately 1,800 acres will be covered by solar panels when positioned horizontally, which is just under 50% of the total leased land. As you will hear further in the presentation, about 2,000 acres of new vegetation will be installed throughout the fenced area and beyond as a screening buffer. The proposed screening buffer results in the equivalent of 17 miles of landscape screening. Now I'll be moving to slide 12, if you're following along. This is the preliminary layout. It's an overall view of the proposed project. As I stated before, the project is located in Saluda Township. It's south of Chelsea and north of the county line. Generally, the project is east of Highway 62, between the highway and the Ohio River. Per the ordinance, the solar panels need to be 150 feet away from existing non-participating residences. The project has self-imposed a 300-foot setback around adjacent residences as a further buffer and to reduce any impact. Wooded areas. As you can see, the project has avoided any existing wooded areas and any major clearing of forested land. Fencing is proposed throughout the project as a 7-foot galvanized hog wire type fencing in keeping with the character of the surrounding area. The 7-foot height is sufficient to keep people out for safety, but short enough to allow for the passage of deer or others over the fence. Also noteworthy is that it's lifted 1 foot off the ground to allow for small mammals to pass through. The fencing is shown as the red-orange lines on the site plan around the solar tractor blocks. We have worked hard to individually fence the separate tractor blocks to allow wildlife to pass through the project easily. It's been designed so that wildlife could live in harmony with the proposed project. Moving to slide 13. Board, you guys have two pieces there. I'm only going to go into detail on some of the project standards instead of all of them that you have there in your packet, just for time purposes. So I'm just addressing the ones that are already addressed throughout the rest of the presentation. So the height of the panels are proposed to be 12 foot high at max tilt. The project will be in compliance with alternative B for the ground cover proposal. We discussed this further in the proposed conditions of approval and we'll go over later in the presentation. Aviation protection. Per the glint and glare study completed by Capital Airspace, the project is not within 500 feet of an existing airport. Photovoltaic solar cells capture the sun's rays and convert them into usable energy. So they are designed to absorb light, not reflect it. Development plan. A detailed plan has been submitted with the current application and the project will go through the development plan review process after special exception approval. And last but not least, no solar storage is included with this part of the application, as part of this application. Moving on to landscaping. Per the ordinance, the project is required to install landscaping in certain areas. This landscaping is shown in detail in the submitted site plan package. It's generally located along public rights-of-way and opposite and around any dwelling. The proposed landscaping includes a variety of trees and taller shrubs, including red cedar, arborvitae, dogwood, redbud, hawthorn, viburnum, ninebark, and serviceberry, as well as a pollinator seed mix ground cover. This combination will thrive in the area, be pleasant to look at, and most importantly, provide and exceed the screening that the ordinance requires. There are 4 types of screening methods incorporated into the proposal. Type 1 is the heaviest, with a 20-foot wide varietal landscape buffer within 300 feet of existing residences. Type 2 includes a 12-foot evergreen buffer greater than 300 feet away from residences. Type 3 includes a 12-foot varietal buffer to further blend into existing view sheds and views to the north. And type 4 includes a natural forested screening buffer that is intended for use around existing natural areas. Now I'd like to introduce Mary Soliday to discuss our proposed decommissioning agreement.
Hello, can you all hear me? Good evening. My name is Mary Soliday. I am based in Indianapolis, but I have worked on solar projects literally all corners of the state for about the last 6 years. I have also worked with many county attorneys and boards and commissioners regarding decommissioning agreements. These are very important agreements. We have tendered to the case file our proposal, which we think is best practice. We look forward to finalizing this document with your counsel, Mr. McGrath, as well as with the county commissioners. I would like to very briefly summarize very key elements of this agreement for the board's understanding. First of all, the most important element of the decommissioning agreement is a third-party security. The concept behind this is that the county and its taxpayers will never be at risk to decommission a project. We instead provide, first of all, an independent third-party engineer that determines the removal costs, and then we deliver third-party security independent of Orion. These would be typically major financial institutions to post a bond or other security that would have to be updated every 5 years for the life of the project. So the way the legal documentation would work is that the county may make a claim on the bond if the project were to not decommission, and there would be adequate funds based on that third-party engineer. We also want to emphasize that for this project, we hope it will be approved after the board hears all the testimony on this matter. This project cannot be expanded, it cannot be enlarged, it can't be moved to a new location. So we wanted to make sure that that was well understood. And lastly, were the project to be assigned to another legal entity, that security has to go with that assignment, meaning whoever is the assignee of the project has to step in, either the security is transferred or new security. But again, the idea is that this is a best we can draft as attorneys, but a fail-safe way to make sure the county and its citizens are protected. And I also might add, before I conclude, that I cannot think of another industry that has to provide a decommissioning bond to a county. Meaning, think about factories and even really traditional power plants. They don't have decommissioning requirements. I think this document that we've tendered your case file, that again, we look forward to finalizing with your attorney and with the commissioners, is the best practice. And we look forward to answering any questions that you have about it. So thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce Pete Berthelsen to discuss the environmental aspects. Sorry, I apologize. Justin. Got ahead of myself there.
Thank you. I don't know if I should put that as, Justin Enders, thank you for being here tonight. So I'm an attorney representing the applicant. We're here, and I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. We're here for a special exception for approval of solar energy system. And so what we're not here for is a variance or a zone change amendment or PUD or anything where we're not complying with your unified development ordinance. So there's a couple statutes in the ordinance that are going to guide us today. That's the zoning statute of 3674-918-2, and then your own unified development ordinance. Chapter 7 addresses the considerations that the board is going to consider. And what we are here asking for is, again, a special exception, which is a contemplated use in this zone district. So it is a permitted use in general that requires this special exception hearing. It is not something we're asking for an amendment to the zoning ordinance. This is in an AG district contemplated as used by your updated last zoning ordinance in 2023. Again, we are not only complying with the chapter 3 that deals with solar energy systems, your ordinance does have that as well. But the conditions that you guys will consider today in the testimony, the application material, are essentially 6 questions. And just so that we're all on the same page, I'd like to call those out. So the factors you're going to consider are the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the special exception will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, morals, or general welfare. The special exception will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity of the purposes already permitted. 3, the establishment of the special exception will not impede or substantially alter normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property for uses permitted in this district. 4, adequate utilities, road, access road, drainage, and other necessary facilities have been or are being provided. 5, adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide ingress and egress so designed as to minimize traffic congestion on public roadways. And finally, the special exception will be located in a district where such use is permitted, and all other requirements set forth in this UDO that are applicable to such use will be met. And I'm going to submit that the following testimony that you're going to hear will show each of those factors being met and demonstrate the elements as the evidence includes. Thank you.
Okay, now Kate Berthelsen will be speaking.
All right, thank you for the opportunity to come here tonight. I'm going to chat just a little bit about the vegetative aspects that are being proposed on here and how that meets the different objectives of the project. Let me give you just a brief introduction of myself. I'm a farmer and a rancher. So I care deeply about the land, about soil health. I'm going to talk about those things tonight. I'm an amateur beekeeper. That means I have a couple of hives. But what I am is a wildlife biologist that has spent my career designing, establishing, and managing wildlife habitat. And for the last number of years, since 2017, have worked very closely with utility scale solar primarily, but other solar projects as well. Just the 2024 projects that we work with across the state, you can see there's a significant number of projects that we work with in the state. And I would also say with this slide up there, I think it's important to know that every project is unique and an individual, and that's the way Conservation Blueprint approaches that. Having said that, whether we're talking about a project in Kansas or Virginia or Indiana, the concerns that people have related to soil health, the environment, water quality, what's the vegetative cover look like on it, are very common. So we work on quite a few projects where we discuss these issues and weave them into the project. So it's already been mentioned a little bit earlier, but for the ground cover options for this project has selected alternative B in your ordinance language, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about how this project intends to deliver the requirements on alternative B. One of the first ways that that's going to happen is that there will be a vegetation management plan that is developed uniquely for this project. And a vegetation management plan is like, I consider it to be like the code for that project. How do you go about establishing the vegetation, managing it, make sure that what is being said that is going to be delivered actually happens? And so a vegetation management plan will be developed uniquely for this project, thinking about this geography, this soil type, the goals and objectives of this individual project. Will prescribe very detailed, specific information about how to get that kind of vegetation, and then there will be 2 unique seed mixtures designed for this project. And the vegetation management plan will go into very detailed descriptions about how is that vegetation planted, how is the site prepared, what's the seed mixture, and then how does management happen on the site in the future, so that things that will happen, like on any ground that was formerly in agricultural production, when you remove those herbicide applications and things, you 100% are guaranteed you will have an abundance of weeds that show up on the site. The vegetation management plan will walk us through exactly how we go about handling that, planning for it, and dealing with it in a very quick manner. Another thing that will happen with this project is here in Indiana, Indiana is one of about 16 states in the country that have what is referred to as a solar pollinator scorecard. And in this case, it's a card that Conservation Blueprint helped develop and provided comment to with Purdue, who took the lead on developing this. We have run through the project and what is being proposed and talked about should this project move forward. And this project will score ahead of time. Before things have been done, we've estimated that this project would score about 115 points, which is well above the mark that is needed to be considered pollinator friendly in their solar pollinator scorecard. And one of the key ways that this project would be able to achieve that high ranking is by taking a 2 seed mixture approach to this project vegetatively. And if this is not this project drawing, this is a real world project from Indiana in another location of the state. But if you look at this, the area that is kind of in this mauve color right here is the area where panels occur on the project inside the fence. And that mauve colored area represents what we refer to as a solar array seed mixture. That seed mixture is designed with no less than 16 different objectives and factors that go into that seed mixture. How do we make sure that fire danger is reduced? If we're using bifacial panels, how do we increase the albedo effect, the reflecting of light back up onto the panels from underneath? All kinds of different factors go into that. In the areas of this project that are in green, those are areas where we design and establish what's called a buffer area seed mixture. And that is a seed mixture that is a more traditional type of pollinator seed mixture that can be designed without any vegetative height restrictions because there are not panels there. So we don't worry about producing shading on the panel. And in this example, these green areas where the buffer mix happens could either be located inside the fence or they could be located outside the fence if that area needs to be vegetated. Say the adjoining landowner decides that due to the size, shape, and location, I'm not going to continue to farm those couple of acres. The project would still have the obligation to vegetate them, and that could be a great area to use that buffer mixture. The project is very much thinking about pollinator health and habitat benefits. And I know that from the Solar 101 meeting that we put on, this is an area that locally receives some attention and has some concern. I want to give just quickly 2 examples of how a project like this could benefit pollinator health and habitat. This table that you're looking at here shows the annual average honeybee hive losses in the country. And what you should see from this is that we're averaging between 40 and 50% annual losses of honeybee hives. And this red line is the line where the sustainability of commercial beekeeping lies. And we're well above that. A project like this that would provide a contiguous or nearly contiguous set of high quality pollinator habitat could be extremely positively impactful on honeybee health. And I'll give one more example. What I consider to be the most iconically recognized insect in the country, the monarch butterfly, is currently under consideration for the Endangered Species Act listing. That decision will come out in December. And if I show you one more table real quick, this is the estimated population of the eastern monarch butterfly population. The monarchs that you see right here every year are represented in this. And the most recent population estimates right here are the second lowest ever recorded in this past year. This red line right here is the estimated population level that we have to be at for the most iconically recognized insect in the country to be sustainable. A project like this can do things like establish milkweed in those buffer areas. And yes, believe it or not, a project like this can be highly impactful for pollinator health for things like monarch butterflies. This project in Orion has committed this project to delivering multiple environmental benefits. I get excited because these environmental benefits all can be positively impacted and delivered by how we design the vegetative cover that will be planted on the project. I get really excited about the opportunity to think about all of these things and how can we take one of our most precious resources, soil health, the organic matter that takes centuries to build, and how can we do even better with a project like that. So I know that on something that has been in agriculture, those are really important issues. Some other environmental benefits, just quickly, grassland, birds. You might not think about this very often, but in the last 40 years, grassland bird populations have decreased in some cases by 80 to 90%. This project can go a tremendous difference in providing really significant access to habitat for species that have dropped off. So I just want to finish by talking about soil health. As a farmer and a rancher, a landowner, it's really important to me. And we don't have the ability to stick a probe in the ground and have that reading say good soil health or bad soil health. There's not such a thing. But what we can do is we can look at multiple soil health factors to tell us whether we have good soil health or not. So the things that we're going to look at and for this project are things like, there's 4 factors that you can look at. Soil organic matter, the physical structure of the soil, the chemical structure of the soil, and the biological structure of the soil. And so if somebody is out there thinking, boy, they say they want to return this to, it can go back to agriculture at the end of this. And how do we know the soil will be in good health at the end of it? Well, one of the best real world situations that we can look at is the USDA's Conservation Reserve Program. And if you're unfamiliar with that program, the USDA takes active agriculture out of production and plants a permanent vegetative cover on it. Exactly what we're talking about doing with this solar project right here. And in that program, it's a 10-year program, many of those acres at the end of 10 years go back into agriculture, okay? So we have real world examples and studies that are out there that have looked at those CRP acres. What's the soil health at the end of 10 years? And are those producing significant soil health benefits? And the answer is yes. This project is talking about basically 3 times the number of years that it would be planted to a vegetative cover that is specifically thinking about how do we get environmental benefits, soil health benefits out of that. And remember, there's 4 categories that we're looking at to document and make sure that we're delivering those soil health benefits. So my last slide is that this project, Orion, is very, very seriously thinking about multiple environmental benefits with this project. And I'm excited to be here tonight to tell you that those can be obtained by how we design the vegetation of the project.
Thank you so much, Pete.
Real quick, I got a quick question on what's your plan for the noxious weeds like Johnson grass and some of that? What's the plan for that?
Yep, so there will be a vegetation management plan that's developed for this project that talks about all of that. You just gave an example of a species that has the ability for those seeds to lie dormant in the soil for decades. And when you stop that agricultural activity of where you're putting herbicides out there, they show up. You might not have seen them for decades, and all of a sudden they show up. That's where we have to think about site preparation. Number one, if they show up, we have to take care of it immediately. Boom. Don't let them take off. They're harder to control. They can become herbicide resistant. We have to take care of it immediately. And the vegetation management plan that we've written calls for, if there is a gap, a time lag between grading and when you can plant your final vegetative cover, we need to establish a cover crop. And the vegetation management plan says within 48 hours of when that disking is completed, and our cover crop needs to be something that is highly allelopathic. Start thinking about cereal rye, so that we're able to keep those species that are a big problem at bay. So we've thought about all of those issues because those are absolutely real world issues. And if we don't address them, we will have a problem. Not maybe, we will.
Okay, thank you so much, Pete. Now I'd like to introduce Chris Sandifer to discuss some health and safety.
Good evening, board. Thank you for allowing us to present tonight. My name is Chris Sandifer. I am a professional engineer in the States. I'm also an electrical contractor with unlimited classification. I have installed many solar farms. As Pete, I'm also a farmer, also a beekeeper. And I own part of the family farm that we have is 100 acres of it is in panels like this. And I own another 1.25 megawatt solar facility that I own outright. So these panels are made from, there's nothing exotic in them. The 98% of the mass of this panel is from the three most common elements found in the Earth's crust. It's oxygen, silicon, and aluminum. And that makes up 98% of what we see right here. We've got 40 years of history in the United States of using utility scale solar panel, and we've had they have provided reliable energy, dependable energy during that time. These panels do not sustain combustion. They meet the EPA's toxicity characteristic leach procedure. That's a test that's used to determine if an item can be put into a non-hazardous Class B landfill. These panels will meet those and exceed those levels of toxicity. Not saying that it would ever be put in a landfill. They're much too valuable to be disposed of like that. But if they were, they could be put in there if they needed to. That toxicity test is basically to simulate the harsh metabolic phases of that a landfill goes through. And so these panels are put through that test, and they do not leach out chemicals that would harm you. They do contain up to 7, depending on the manufacturer, 9 grams of lead that is used. It's in the solder. It's amalgamated into other metals like tin or silver, but it's the same solder that in common appliances that you have in your house. The amount of solder and the amount of lead that would be in a panel like this would be approximately equal to the natural lead that would be in the ground for the top 3 inches of soil. So it's not, and the lead in here does not leach out. It's not like this, the lead that's already in the soil. I was gonna say, these panels have a glass cover on them, they're resistant to hail, but we can tilt them. And what happens is if a hailstorm is imminent, then they can go vertical, and we can reduce that amount of possible damage from hail. If it's going to be high wind, we can rotate them horizontal, take that wind loading away, which is often done to protect those panels. That's called single axis tracking. They track the sun, and that's the reason they have those motorized trackers on. And also we can turn them to get the snow load off of them. So the bases, the panels, the racks, the brackets will all be designed to withstand the wind loadings in the area that they're going to be put in. I'll talk just a little bit about glare. These panels track the sun. As they track the sun, they keep the sun at a 90-degree angle. If you keep the sun at a 90-degree angle, then there's no glare from the sun. They also have anti-glare coating on them to help stop any kind of incidence of glare. There will be no EMI or EMF. There'll be no electric magnetic fields or interference beyond what's the background of the earth at the property boundary. You go inside, there could be places like inverters or transformers, just like it would be any other substation that utility has that would have power, but at the boundary of the project, there would be no EMI or EMF beyond what you would normally find in the environment. One quick statement on the mast: these are not heavy. This one probably weigh in the neighborhood of 50 kilograms, and so there's not enough mass there to absorb heat during the day at light frequencies and then re-radiate it during the night at infrared frequencies or as heat. Can it get hot to the touch during the day? Yes, it can. But if you get 10 meters, the temperature will be the same. If you go 15 meters to the side, the temperature is already back to the normal temperature. I would, a couple more things I just want to say. We've got a history, I'm from South Carolina, and we've got a history of, I would say, 20 years of having these, and we've gone through tornadoes, we've gone through hailstorms, we've gone through floods, we've gone through multiple hurricanes, and there's been no incidents of any kind of health and safety issues as a result of those severe weather incidents. And so I just wanted to say, kind of in closing, these panels are monitored 24/7. If one panel out of a string goes bad, is cracked or whatever, then that whole string becomes inoperable. And that gets somebody's attention. That's revenue you need to get back. And so it would be put as quickly as possible to replace a bad panel and put a good one in to get that whole string to work again. I just, in my professional opinion, have owned as an engineer contractor, installed them without hesitation of any kind of equivocation. These panels will not materially endanger the health and safety of anybody in Jefferson County. I'm here to answer any questions.
I got a quick question. You mentioned wind. What are they they've been tested to. I mean, you have a certain, if it hits 100 mile an hour, 70, they will blow over because, you know, there's gotta be some kind of test out
Yeah,
there.
in our area, it's 140 miles an hour.
140 is what they've been rated at.
Yes. I'm not sure what the wind load is here or in Indiana, but on the coast, that's what we put them into.
And that's what these will be.
These have not been designed yet. This is way premature for doing wind loading, so I can't tell you what they'll be designed for. It will be designed according to the approved wind loading for this area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Chris. Now I'd like to pass it off to Brian.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, board, and thank you all in attendance. I actually used to be a community college professor, so I might have some flashbacks. I am a volunteer firefighter. I have been based out of New York State. I was certified in firefighter training in a small town, rural community, just population 3,000, north of the city, back in 2009. In my experience, Orion stands out in their emergency response plan diligence and stands out here for partnering with local Hanover volunteer fire company, listening diligently to the members and fulfilling their every request. And I have some examples, but first I just want to point out, in my experience, I have met with fire departments and I've listened to their concerns, and I reach out to renewable energy companies to kind of make sure that there's an honest investment in the community, a partnership. Being a volunteer firefighter myself, I know the toll it can take on a community when that's your line of defense, is basically the volunteer firefighters. So I really admire and I'm really impressed by Orion's efforts reaching out to the local community. And just as you can see here, from listening to the Hanover Volunteer Fire Company, they have a substantially detailed emergency management plan. Sometimes I've seen some that are just kind of a small bullet point, but here they've gone through and they have, they make sure that the facility fully complies with the latest state and national regulations, provides detailed contact information. That's an important key. You want to make sure that if there's any kind of facility in your community, that there is a means of communicating with the operators of that community or of that facility. Detailed site maps, a part of this emergency management plan. Impressively detailed emergency response protocols, all advised by the Hanover Volunteer Fire Company. Now, also, what's most important for a lot of volunteer firefighters is, in the case of emergency response, what is the access to the facility? Based on from feedback from Hanover Fire Company, there will be access at all gates using Knox boxes. That's key and encoded for any kind of emergency use. And also, importantly, NFA, National Fire Protection Association, approved ingress and egress routes for the specific vehicles in the fleet. Now, different companies have different fleets, different vehicles that they use for the typical fires that they have in the area. So we've listened to the fire company, we've learned what their fleet are. And basically the ground that the way of getting in and getting out is very clear, and it's exactly to Fire Protection Association standards. Now, also very important is communicating trainings. Now that's also very key. The local fire department needs to be very familiar with the facility. So Orion impressively has agreed to provide trainings at multiple points throughout the project lifecycle, pre-construction, during construction, and annually in the years after. things changed in the facility and certain fire protocol and procedures changed. So Orion will continue providing, or the operator of the site will continue providing trainings annually. Now also emergency response, as was discussed, there's a robust vegetative management plan. And when it comes to firefighting, most firefighters will tell you it's key is understanding the fuel source of the fire. Now, with this facility, emergency response equals landscape maintenance and adequate water resources for perimeter control. So what's key here is that we're discussing pollinators, and it reaches the Indiana pollinator scorecard. And pollinators are key in a lot of ways, and there's fire prevention measures when it comes to pollinators. First of all, it'll be pretty key that they don't grow that high. Usually they don't, I think in this case, specifically 18 inches high only. And also if emergency vehicle does get in within the facility, pollinators often are at the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to flammability. In some parts, I've worked in other parts of the country, in other states, there's native wildflowers and native plantings that kind of are in the higher end of flammability, whereas here, these pollinators will be at the lower end. And also, should a vehicle need to get around the site, most pollinators are great with drainage or percolation, meaning there's not going to be a lot of muddy locations should they have to drive a vehicle around the perimeter if they needed to. If they had to drive around the perimeter, there would be not muddy spots from the percolation, but also there's robust root structure, so the ground will also remain really hard. So and also when I say emergency response equals landscape management, what I mean is that in most cases, fire response, it would be a grass fire. And so the key response would be maintain the perimeter, which can be done using just water, just a water trailer coming in and also a pumper truck. And that is the response. And that's it. So not only has Orion addressed handover volunteer fire companies every single request, but they've exceeded to a level I've not seen in my 15-year experience working with fire departments. They are actually partnering with the fire company to the point of funding a building a new fire station within very close proximity to the Idlewild facility. And that's a new fire station for the whole community. And we're providing that so that there is fire response close to the facility, but also something that is a benefit to the entire community. In fact, I believe there's members of the company here tonight that can attest to the integrity of the partnership that Orion has established with them. So that's it for me.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to now introduce Ken Kaliski to discuss noise.
I didn't get a question.
That's good.
Thanks. My name is Ken Kaliski, principal at RSG, a consulting company in White River Junction, Vermont. I've got 38 years of experience, 30 years with renewable energy. I'm board certified through the Institute of Noise Control Engineering, and with the Institute of Noise Control Engineering, I'm co-chair of their Technical Activity Committee for Renewable Energy Noise. I'm also a member of the Acoustical Society of America as part of their Technical Committee on Noise. So I'm going to talk today about the sound study that I helped prepare. And just to give you some background, solar projects do generate sound. There are 4 components of sound from solar projects. The solar panels are not one of them. The solar panels themselves don't generate any sound. The biggest source of sound from solar projects are the inverters, which are usually co-located with these medium voltage transformers. The inverters can convert the DC electricity from the panels to AC electricity. and then the co-located transformers increase the voltage so that the electricity could move to the substation. The second largest source of sound is the substation transformer itself. Both inverter sound and substation sound are minimized by trying to move them as far away as possible from homes. So sound diminishes by approximately 6 decibels per doubling of distance. So the further away you move them from homes, the quieter it will be. The substation itself is probably a little over a quarter mile away from the closest home. And the inverters are situated internal to the project. So you won't see inverters sort of on the edge of the project near homes. They'll always be roughly speaking with solar panels around them. The solar panels will in fact act as sound barriers. We don't include that in our sound modeling, but it will help to reduce noise. Our sound modeling is done using the international standard ISO 9613-2. That standard takes into account the source sound emissions, how much sound they generate themselves, the distance from the sources to the homes, the terrain between the sources and the homes, and meteorology. And we try to use worst case assumptions. I have sort of a picture of that here. We model the sound as if there is a moderate nighttime inversion. So what happens with cooler air near the ground and warmer air aloft in an inversion, the sound bends down towards the ground, it refracts towards the ground. So with respect to sound, that's a worst case condition. In fact, for a solar project, these maximum sound emissions are during a sunny day. That's when your inverters are taking the maximum power output from the solar panels. And the transformer substation, the substation transformer, would have its fans operating. But during a sunny day, that's when the sun heats the ground, burns off any type of inversion there would be. And in that situation, the sound actually bends upward towards the sky. And you get what's called shadow zones, where there are reduced sound levels around the project. So while we have the worst case, while we're modeling the worst case sound emissions from a sunny day, we're also modeling the worst case meteorology for a nighttime inversion. So we're trying to be conservative. So the next slide here shows the modeling results, and I'm just going to take a second to go through this. It's split up between the two parts of the project, the northwestern part of the project on the left side, the southeastern part of the project on the right side, and there's actually a little bit of overlap between the two graphics. The shaded areas in blue, that's the project footprint. You see sort of these little dots, these green squares. These are the inverters. The substation is down here along County Line Road. And the colored lines you see are the sound contours. So I'll turn your attention to these dotted pink dash line, or the dashed pink line. That's your 50 decibel contour. And for the most part, that 50 decibel contour is all within the project boundary. And then the next line is the orange line. That's the 45 decibel contour. And with one exception, other than one exception, all of the homes are outside of that 45 decibel contour. In fact, 70% of the homes have sound levels of 40 decibels or less than 40 decibels.
You know where that one exception is?
Yes, the one exception is on Tyler Road. That's in here. Taylor Road, yeah. Yeah. So the highest sound level is at 46 decibels. And just to give you some context about what that means, there's no noise limit in this county.
So we compared this to the Madison City ordinance and the Clark County ordinance. The city ordinance, the nighttime limit is 55 decibels. Clark County solar ordinance is 50 decibels. 50 decibels would be the equivalent of let's say a car idling at 50 feet away or a field of insects. So we chose as a design goal the lower of those two standards, 50 decibels. So we're lower than those guidelines or those standards. We're also lower than, say, the World Health Organization guideline for annoyance for daytime sound levels. All of the project sound levels are below 50 decibels. So in conclusion, we performed the sound propagation modeling for the project. We looked at representative equipment specifications using conservative modeling, and we found that at the maximum output under these worst case meteorological conditions, the highest sound level would be 46 decibels at 1 and the project sound levels are below the design goals established for the project, 50 decibels. As a result, the project won't endanger the health and safety of the community with respect to noise. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Ken. I now would like to pass it off to Rich Kirkland, discussing some property valuation.
Good evening. Again, my name is Rich Kirkland, with Kirkland Appraisals. I'm state certified general appraiser out of North Carolina. I'm licensed in Indiana, Illinois, and about a dozen other states as well. Also an MAI through the Appraisal Institute, which is the highest designation they've put forward. I've been appraising for about 28 years. I started my company about 21 years ago and started doing impact analysis about 20 years ago. Impact analysis is why I'm here tonight. It's where we look at whether or not something is going to impact adjoining property value. We've been doing that type of analysis with solar projects for about 14 years. In that time, we've worked in about 28 states looking at solar projects. We've looked at over 1,000 solar projects across the country. And we've been working in Indiana for a number of years looking at these projects as well. What we're doing when we're looking at these is we're really focusing on what's called externalities. Externalities is just a characteristic of a property that might have an impact on the adjoining property. But when we have done analysis, we find impacts on property values that typically fall into certain kind of like hierarchy of categories. The number one thing that causes negative impacts to adjoining property value would be hazardous materials. So anything that can get into those soil, the air, or the water. As was discussed earlier, solar projects just don't have that characteristic. The next coming down as far as impacts on property value, the next thing you would look at would be odor. And again, solar projects just do not have that characteristic. We go down to noise, which we were just hearing about. Again, solar is very consistent with rural locations and no characteristic there that we would be concerned with from an appraisal standpoint. And we just keep going down that hierarchy. We go down, there's stigma, there's traffic. And again, solar really just doesn't trigger on any of those except for the last one, which is appearance. Appearance is the one characteristic that we would look at in solar. So the number one thing we typically hear from neighbors is that we just don't want to see. Appearance issues, when we find them that are difficult to mitigate, it would typically be tall things like water towers, billboards, things of that nature. And in this case, we're looking at something that's lower to the ground, and there are options for mitigating in terms of landscaping, but also setback. That's typically how you address appearance issues is distance and something to block your view. To do the actual impact analysis itself, we followed a number of different steps. We have done matched pair analysis. It's also called paired sales analysis, where it's very straightforward. This is used by appraisers all over the country. You look at a property next to a solar project, compared to similar homes that are sold in the same time period that are not next to a solar project, to see if there's anything in there that you would attribute to that solar project. We've also done what's called a resale analysis. This is where you look at a home that is sold next to a solar project, and it's sold after the solar project was built, and you go back in time till you find an earlier sale before the solar project was considered. And you take that original sale and you adjust that one upward for appreciation during that time period. We just rate that based on the FHFA home price index. It's all the way down to the zip code and tells you what typical appreciation is for that zip code right through that same time period. So we can look to see if there's anything we would attribute to impacts. Make sure that things are appreciating at the same rate they should be. So we've done both types of analysis. We've looked at a number of projects nationwide, but specific to Indiana, we looked at 10 different solar farms where we found 18 different home sales that we were able to do paired sales and sale resale analysis. And that is supporting the finding of no impact on property values. We've also looked at university studies. There's a number of them that get cited. There's a study out of Texas that gets brought up a bit. It's really a survey of appraisers and assessors. The most interesting thing about that one is that they had responses from appraisers and assessors who indicated that they had never actually appraised anything next to a solar farm. And some of the appraisers said they had. The responses from the appraisers on what they thought the impact on property value would be was radically different between the two groups. The group that said they had never actually appraised anything next to a solar project assumed very large negative impacts. The group who had actually done research and actually appraised something next to solar farms had nominal to positive impacts. So again, that study concluded nominal to no impacts, and they also concluded that landscaping likely would address the concerns of the first group. There's another study out of Rhode Island. We've looked at that one, and that one gets brought up a lot because the abstract says, hey, we found a negative impact around solar projects. That study was done in home sales in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And what they find when you read into the report itself, they only found those negative impacts in high population density areas. So in urban locations or very densely populated suburban areas. When they looked at rural areas, they specifically said that they found no impact on property value in rural areas. They used the typical definition for rural, 500 people per square mile or less. And in those areas, they found no impact on property value. They even did a sensitivity test and started to change that definition over where they went up to 2,000 people per square mile, which is really a much more suburban area. And they still found no negative impact on adjoining property values when they moved that definition. So again, the Rhode Island study supports a finding of no impact on property value at this location, which is a rural site. There's a study out of Georgia Tech that looked at agricultural land sales and looked at those in North Carolina. Again, it supported a finding of no impact on agricultural land sales. They actually found a very mild positive impact if the farm they were looking at, that sale happened to be along the same power line structure. They assumed that there was some perception of enhancement for properties along that power line. And the final one I was just going to bring up is the Berkeley study. The Lawrence Berkeley study gets cited a lot. They looked into about 6 states. They came up with a nominal impact they found within a half-mile radius of these projects. And again, we addressed this in the study that we've submitted, but you can see that they did not actually address landscaping in any way, shape, or form in that analysis. And furthermore, the 2 examples they give are actually in high population density areas. So again, their findings are more consistent with that Rhode Island study and the breakdown of that. But again, it was a nominal impact they found. So going back to just a very specific example, I thought I'd give you one very specific example here in Indiana. We looked at a Bellflower Solar. It's a 150 plus megawatt project. It was built and energized, started producing power on the grid in 2023. We looked at a home sale there that sold in January 2024 after it was built. And that home sold for $650,000. The home itself, when you measure from home to panel, which is how we always look at that, it's 360 feet from the nearest point of the house to the nearest panel. And again, the paired sales analysis, we compared it to 3 similar homes that sold in that area, same time frame, and we're showing no negative impact. In fact, we identified a very mild positive impact. We spoke with a broker who was involved with that, and they confirmed that there was no impact on the marketing, the timing of the sales, or the sales price itself. So that's just an example of the data that we have crunched in there. In Indiana, again, we've got 18 data points like this that we looked at, and we have around 150 that we've looked at nationally that are in the report you can see as well. So it's my professional opinion, just in conclusion, my professional opinion that this project as proposed has sufficient setbacks to protect adjoining property values. The closest home in this case is going to be about 300 feet. The average distance to the adjoining homes is going to be at over 500 feet. So when we're measuring essentially a football field to the closest home and almost 2 football fields to the average home, we've got a substantial amount of setbacks that will protect those home values, and there's still a landscaping screen to help buffer that. So it's my professional opinion, this project as proposed will protect adjoining property values, and there will be no negative impacts. Be happy to answer questions or go into any greater detail if you'd like.
Hey, so before that home sold, how many people looked at it?
Hold on. No. Let the board ask the questions, and we'll get back to when you address the audience, or when you can, is your name on there to speak? There's a sign-up sheet. I think he was referring to the board. He's referring to the board.
When do we get that?
You'll get time to speak here in a minute. They're about done. I did a little bit of research myself, and it seems like, and I got some of this information from Purdue University, and they're indicating it wasn't a lot, but any home within a half mile of a large solar farm, there was a reduction of about 1.5%, 1.7.
That's from the Lawrence Berkeley study that they're referencing.
And that the further away you got, the less impact you saw. I mean, if you're over a mile, they didn't really see any impact to property values, but within that mile, there was some impact.
That was what the Berkeley study came up with, and again, that's that nominal impact, that 1.5% if you're within half a mile. The trick is you can see, if you look in my report, I can give you a page number if you want it, but there's two example solar projects they show in that study. One is the Folsom Solar Project. That project is next to a large manufacturing facility for the Intel processing chips, and it has a divided highway that separates it. There's an office building on the other side, and then the houses are on the other side of the office buildings. So again, the solar project was separated from those homes by a number of commercial uses as well as a large industrial use. Similarly, the other project they show is in McHenry Solar, and it is surrounded by industrial uses. And the houses that they are finding an impact on are screened. In that case, McHenry Solar is well screened, but surrounded by industrial uses, which begs the question, was it the industrial uses that they're identifying that's having an impact, or the solar project? The project in Folsom that they give an example of, there's zero landscaping screen around that project, and it's right up against the highway, but it's separated. This is the problem with that Lawrence Berkeley study, is that it took a lot of data, but it didn't actually process the details of that data.
I'd like to now introduce Dan Marshall to discuss some stormwater imaging. Just about through, you guys. Bear with us.
Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be here this evening, and thank you all for your time. So as Amanda mentioned, my name is Dan Marshall. I'm a professional engineer working with Kinley Horn. And Kinley Horn is a civil engineering consultant. And on this project, we performed what we call a preliminary hydrology analysis. And really what we're doing is just analyzing the area from a existing condition, where we like to consider like a precondition, to the post-developed condition. So post-construction, when this development is out there, is it more susceptible or less susceptible basically to runoff, to soil erosion of this area? So the way we did this is using a model, as I mentioned. This model is approved by the USDA, the National Resource Conservation Service, so oftentimes called the NRCS. And it's often called the curve number model or the TR55 method. So as I mentioned, basically what we do is we look at the soil data, existing site condition of what's out there currently, and compare it to the post-development condition. So in the current condition out there, it's typically row crop in good condition. We also looked at the different land use out there. There's some wetlands, there's some grassland. So that was all taken into account as what is out there currently. In the post-development condition or post-construction, as we alluded to earlier, it would be planted with a meadow species, a pollinator species. So that was taken into account. Also, though, we have to think about the gravel access roads and other small areas of impervious, I guess, surface that will be put out there. So that's all taken into account into this model. So once the models ran, basically what we find is that the overall curb number decreased. So basically what that tells us is that the overall surface runoff potential is lower in the post-development condition than the current condition that's out there right now, which I mentioned it is mostly row crop. So basically, I guess what we can conclude from that and what I can conclude from that from a preliminary engineering standpoint is that this development would reduce the overall soil erosion potential. Another big thing to note is that agricultural fields lay fallow for a portion of the year after harvest. This would be 24/7, 365 covered by meadow. It's never going to be cut to the ground or harvested or anything. So that protection to the soil for any runoff, for any neighbors that might be concerned about that, will be taken into account. There will be no increase of soil runoff. I also do want to note that this is typically kind of how deep we go to at this stage of the permit. But once this project is approved, it will also need to go through the Jefferson County the Soil and Water Conservation District to get final approval for drainage. So what that means is that a certified professional engineer will need to come through and prepare a stormwater management analysis report, looking at every small area of the site. No area of the site is too small. Basically, they will need to present a plan to the Jefferson County Soil and Water Conservation District to basically control erosion in that area. So that will go through and be approved, once again, reviewed. There's often comments back and forth. So they will also have a say in this once it gets to that point. So once again, this is kind of just a general overview of what we looked into and what will occur in the future. And I'm happy to go into more detail or answer any questions if the board has. Awesome, thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Now, Justin Enders will go over some findings of fact, the application and conditions of approval.
So yes, thank you for your attention, your time. The people that have testified here, I brought up at the beginning the 6 factors that you guys are going to consider. And you have in front of you the application, the exhibits, the engineering report, and then the presentational testimony that's gone over each of those issues. But I'd like to add one additional element. In your packet, you should have additional conditions. And in addition to complying with the Unified Development Ordinance and your solar ordinance section as well, we've also offered some additional conditions that are on top of that. And some of which you've heard, but I'm going to call out a few of them. So for example, the ground cover buffer, there's an alternate, and we've provided what we think is the most helpful option for that ground cover. The decommissioning commitment within your packet, again, there should be a separate tab for the conditions. That is over and above, there is no requirement for that. That is something we are submitting as additional conditions for the essentially the bonded piece of the decommissioning agreement. You heard a little bit about the emergency responder protocols and what we were doing over and above. Mr. Stump testified that we've exceeded those in ways. And the PV panels also, again, meeting standards that aren't in your ordinance, but over and above that to make sure that we are complying and fitting in a way that is most beneficial. Construction best practices are also indicated in some of these conditions. So what we're going to do, they're going to limit construction and even the development of the project. Testing, I know that was maybe talked about a little bit, but there's going to be a pre-conditioned soil test baseline that they're going to submit to. Any major event would allow them to have another soil test to see if there is any difference in that. So there's an opportunity to essentially have updated tests when any major event occurs. But they're intending to submit, again, an additional condition of having a baseline soil test. Job fair as well, so local job fair with notice, website, newspaper for any of the local jobs that may be created by this. And then the setbacks, I know those have been mentioned a time or two, but your ordinance contains setbacks. We're going to meet all those, but we're also going to submit to additional setbacks so that it does fit in and address some of the potential points that are of concern. So when I look at these conditions in the testimony, my hope is that you see the same thing I do, that this is not only a serious effort, but a sincere effort to fit within the needs of the community. I think they've been open and careful, and the experts and studies are all part of the things that address each of these 6 elements. And I'm not going to go over those elements, but again, I think the record to speak for itself on that. But they're in front of you. But these conditions are essentially our effort to put additional regulations on the project over and above what the regulations you have currently in place. I think the best practices and would serve the project. So I ask for your approval of the special exception application. And
Thank you so much, Justin. And yes, so you guys do have a separate tab that it goes in detail about the conditions of approval, not part of the PowerPoint, but there's a separate tab that's labeled conditions in your packet there. If you're wanting to take a look at those. Okay, in wrapping up, I would like to speak about the project benefits of the Idlewild Solar Project. So it will be a long-term partner to the Saluda Township community and surrounding area of Jefferson County. The project represents an approximately $860 million investment in the county. The project committed to long-term donations to the local schools, fire departments, and local events. One donation we're especially excited about is funding the Hanover Volunteer Fire Company for a new firehouse in Saluda Township to serve its residents with quicker response times and hopefully reduce insurance rates. The Idlewild Solar Project is expected to generate roughly 300 to 400 direct construction jobs and 4 to 5 long-term operational jobs located in Saluda Township, and other long-term opportunities for local companies and businesses. There are also indirect jobs that are created from a project like this. For example, US-based solar manufacturers like the one being built in Clark County. There will be a commitment to a job fair with local hiring and guaranteed long-term revenues for landowners and farmers. In the first 30 years, the project will pay approximately $172 million in property taxes, and that is taking into account a 10-year abatement that the county may or may not approve. If the county doesn't approve an abatement, the numbers would change. This includes amounts of over $74 million to the local Southwestern School District. This project also stands to cut the Saluda Township property taxes in half, as well as a 30% decrease in property taxes overall in Jefferson County. The tax base that the project is going to create is the equivalent of building 5,000 single-family homes in Jefferson County. 5,000 single-family homes. So all this to say, we believe the project brings many benefits to Jefferson County, and we're excited to be a part of the community. I'm going to pass it off to Justin, just in closing statements quickly, and then we're happy to answer any other questions the board has. Justin?
All right. Yes, thank you for your time. I apologize. I won't belabor this. The testimony that we've given you submits all the 6 findings. We just ask that you approve the special exception application for you. And we appreciate your time. Be happy to answer anything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Quick question. What's other than this one, your largest project you've done on solar? And equivalent to acres?
So the question was, what is the largest project that we've built to date for a solar project? And that would be in Jasper County, Indiana. It's a 7, and sorry, the portion, most of it is in Jasper County. A portion of it is in Stark County. It's 700 megawatts, and I believe it's over 4,000 acres. And that is in commercial operation right now.
So do you still own that then?
The utility, NIPSCO, is the owner of the project currently.
So you talk about that future thing. Is your plan to retain ownership then if this gets approved? Or is your intentions to market it as soon as it is approved?
Our original intention is to own a project, and we do own projects. In fact, we built the first wind project in Indiana, and we continue to own that project today. It is possible that this project could be owned by a utility as well. So we're leaving that option available.
So you mentioned also, that this solar project could be enough electric for, 4,100 houses or whatever. But so that means you know where the electric is going for this project? If you're indicating that it's going to stay in Indiana with the amount of homes, you got that nailed down then?
I think you're asking, do we know where the electrons for so the electrons will feed into the local power lines here. Those power lines connect into the local substations. And so the way that the electricity will get consumed by the first available user of those electrons before it moves on to the next available user of that electron. So it gets consumed as much as it can be locally before it moves on to the next sink where it's then used. And so much of the power produced, yes, will be used by local. When I say local, it's either county local, and then it moves on to kind of statewide local, and that's commercial industrial users and residential users as well.
So the transmission lines to get onto the grid, have those been established and are those already existing, or are you going to have to have those built going through additional property, or how will it get onto the grid?
So the power will all coalesce at a substation on the property, on the project site. From there, it goes overhead, and it would connect in with the existing utility lines there.
And those lines that are there now, insulated, existing, or
yes,
are big enough or whatever to handle that amount of electricity?
Yes, the existing lines are already operational. They've been operational for several years, I want to say decades even, and they can handle this amount of power. This region is a power hub, and you all probably realize there are two very large facilities here. The project is being designed to integrate with those facilities and continue to power those types of customers that those facilities currently serve.
Hi, my name is Michael Krusner. I'm the Vice President of Development for Orion. And I just wanted to clarify one additional thing because of the question you asked about the equivalent number of homes that this project would power. So it's meant as an analogy to give a sense of the amount of electricity this project's going to produce. It's not meant to say that it's going to a local utility or a particular customer. It's just, again, to give a sense generally how much power this facility is going to produce as well. So just wanted to add that clarification to your question.
So the purchaser of the electricity, has that been determined? Is it Duke, REMC? Because those are typically the local electrical companies in this area.
No, the customer for the power of the project has not been fully determined yet. Typically, as Amanda outlined early on in the presentation, customers for power, be it a utility or a large industrial or commercial consumer, which are another subset of customers that we do enter into power purchase contracts with, they need to be able to see that a project is actually buildable, which in this case, in large part, means that a zoning permit has been approved. So it's pretty standard development process that up until you have zoning approvals, that customers aren't going to really talk to you and enter into those contracts. So that's why we can't say specifically what that customer is for this project right now. That is going to happen in the future. That said, as Justin pointed out, one of the reasons why we're here in this part of Indiana is that there is a tremendous need for additional electricity. And there's a special desire for it to come from clean energy such as solar projects. And so one of the reasons why we are here is knowing that there are multiple customers that will be interested in purchasing power from a facility such as this located in this region.
I guess you'll have to give me examples, because I've only known the two, Duke and RMC. So what are some more examples that, you said there's a list, just a random list of.
Yeah, so any major utility in Indiana or in neighboring regions, so the transmission system that we're connecting into does reach multiple regions, multiple states. So it could be any utility that connects into that same system. In addition to large utilities such as the ones that power our homes, there are other types of customers. A big player in the industry now are data centers. They consume tremendous amounts of power. And so we do enter into contracts with companies like Microsoft, like Google, like Meta, that do seek out electricity from these types of projects. So that would be another class. Other major manufacturers, car manufacturers, Walmart, Starbucks, those types of companies are other types of companies that do purchase from utility scale solar projects.
Just some, I think you were asking about specific local utilities that might want to purchase energy from a project like this. So you named Duke, REMC, there's CenterPoint, there's NIPSCO, there's Hoosier as well.
Yes.
There's I&M, Indianapolis, Michigan Power, which is a subsidiary of AEP, I think who you all are well familiar with. So that's a list of potential candidates for taking the energy from this project.
So I guess my big question, if we go to someone that's not a local, are they going to have to build their own transmission lines to get it? Or are they allowed through whatever network to utilize the lines that through Duke and whoever else is in that?
The latter, that there would be no new large transmission lines built by a utility to accommodate this project. This project will tie into the existing infrastructure that's already in place.
And then also just to further clarify, all the power gets fed to the single substation within the project. From there, the project builds a single transmission line to go to the point of interconnection, which is all done on private easements. So we do not rely on a utility to build that line to the existing lines that this project is going to tie into. If that makes sense.
No power condemnation.
Right, so, we're not a utility. We don't condemn land in order to accommodate that power line or the project, just to be very clear. There is no eminent domain right that we have. So every agreement that includes the transmission line that the project will need to build as part of its facilities, along with the substation easement, and along with every facility, a part of the project, the solar panels, access roads and whatnot, are done in private agreements with private landowners, just to be very clear.
Well, since you brought that up, are you able, since you are producing, to be able to apply to be a
Public utility?
public utility?
So I'll try to tackle this one. It's a little complicated. Public utilities in Indiana are regulated by the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, which has strict standards for what does one have to do to be a public utility. The short answer is you have to serve customers directly at retail. That is not what Orion does. It sells power like a wholesaler as opposed to a retailer. I think the other thing I think it's important to note in our record is, were there to be a sale of this project, it would be subject to all the things we talked about, all these conditions, all these plans, meaning that the buyer can't just abandon what conditions or other application documents we've submitted and represented to you tonight. They would be bound by that, particularly decommissioning agreement I mentioned, and other things. So I think that provides some comfort as to a possible utility, a possible major power generator, generator buyer, potentially either acquiring the project or potentially buying the power from the project. So I don't know if I'm answering your questions.
Helpful, thank you. So just to be clear, because I know a concern of mine is if the project is approved, and then we're looking at possible other landowners being affected by this, by transmission lines going down to IKE or wherever. You're saying that is not a possibility and will not happen then?
Correct. So we enter into voluntary agreements with private landowners for every parcel that is necessary to power the project. And that again includes the solar facility itself, as well as the single, what we call a generation tie line to go from the project substation to the existing transmission system. That's all done with private agreements. It is not done relying on another utility or another third party to accomplish that.
Anyone else have any questions?
Can I get your name there in the middle, sir? I'm sorry.
Yes, Michael Kressner, Cressner, and then Justin Wolf.
Justin. Thank you.
I had a question about property values. On the other studies, did it take into account like homes that were surrounded, basically like almost all four sides, by solar panels, solar fields, or is it just in proximity to the solar farm?
When we look at one of these, we're always measuring the closest panel to the closest home, but we recently confirmed one. It's actually not in this study printed document, but it's in Pennsylvania. We have a home that has panels. It's basically in the middle of a solar project. Our panels are 260 feet to the north and 240 feet to the south. That home just sold, but again, no impact according to the broker. It was a unique property, so I was not able to do a paired sales analysis, but I could just discuss it with the broker. And they indicated that they had multiple offers on it. They had one person who indicated that the solar was a concern for them, but actually they still had multiple offers and sold it for above asking price.
You don't have to pay no taxes on that one.
It looked like a lot of the homes in this one, some of them potentially be surrounded on all four sides by panels,
Well, just to clarify that we've been very careful about citing facilities, and I believe that we've been careful enough to the extent that there's not a single non-participating household that is surrounded on all four sides with solar panels as well. It's something that we've been pretty careful to think ahead about because of that concern.
Okay. And then on the terms of noise, what about like wind noise? Not that we see noise from wind, but the wind noise created by the panels being there, the wind blowing through the panels, is that a measure studied or anything like that?
No, there's really no significant noise that occurs from the wind blowing through the panels.
And then like the vegetation control, like how often is it mowed or maintained, or is it like a certain schedule, or has that been determined yet, how it's mowed and maintained?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. The answer to that is gonna depend on what happens.
Okay.
So it really would be a unique answer to that project. You know, is there an abundance of weeds? Were they addressed when it was started and that sort of thing? One answer that I can give you is that we strive very hard to, if there's a lower panel height of say 22 inches, we strive very hard to design a seed mixture that will not grow taller than 20 inches. So there may be a need to mow it, but once established, shading from our perspective would not be one of the reasons why a site would need to be mowed.
Who you mentioned that like there's any grading or dirt work done that within 48 hours they'll have it seeded to cover crop or something like that if there's exposed dirt. How is that enforced? Is that just your all standard, or is that
That is how Conservation Blueprint writes the vegetation management plan. We have no role in the enforcement to answer your question, not trying to dodge it, but we write it for what does the vegetation. And I'm gonna hand it back to the folks that can answer it.
Yeah, I wanted to point out that condition number 3, that's in your record that Justin here, we got 2 Justins, summarized. When we have our development plan hearing, which is required after a BZA, hopefully positive recommendation, there is a requirement, again, under number 3, of a vegetative management plan is submitted to the case file. That is where, sir, I think all these details have to be spelled out in terms of what specific plan will apply to this specific type of land. So I think the reason this gentleman can't answer the question tonight is we haven't quite completed that plan because it's quite intensive to put that together, but that is a condition of approval.
okay? So that, but if it is approved as a condition, then it would be enforced by.
That is correct. Yes, you're exactly right, sir. Every condition in the record can be enforced by your county, meaning by your county attorney or by the zoning board. I don't know. I would have to ask Patrick how you all do enforcement, but it's legally binding is the short answer.
It's through the planning commission. The planning commission has the ability to do enforcement actions on behalf.
Good question.
Yeah,
But
you
Ken, I'm
said-
gonna ask you a question. Does wind actually whip around by these panels? I've never really heard that before. Meaning, why would the wind be different just because I think what your question is, do they create wind tunnels?
No,
No?
I
Okay.
mean, I don't, there's certain types of
Yeah.
fences that you have
Yeah.
wind that you can hear a hum
Right.
from.
Right.
And if you have thousands of acres of panels, I didn't know if if the wind's blowing across it, if you get some vibration
Right.
or a humming noise
Yeah.
or something.
Well, it's a great question. So you're saying, Ken, this has been studied?
I've never heard of that occurring, yes.
Oh, okay, you haven't heard of that occurring?
That's right.
Okay.
What's different?
I'm just kind of wondering when this project expires. I know the cleanup is supposed to be done by you guys. But if you don't, if you're not the owners of the company, you say whoever buys it will be honoring whatever you guys.
Yes.
Okay, has there ever been a final impact of one of these projects that we know of in the United States or anywhere else?
Yeah, I think Michael can handle.
Yeah, so in terms of utility scale projects that have been decommissioned, I personally am not aware of that occurring. However, there are instances of large infrastructure projects, power plants, coal power plants, natural gas plants, other types of generation resources, open pit mining operations and whatnot that are arguably far more extensive than how solar panels are installed on the land and maintained that have successful track records of decommissioning. And so I think if you talked to an engineer that's far more versed in this than I am, again, you're looking at the nature of this type of project. It's panels sitting on a support structure that is pile driven into the ground. And so you're not talking about large chunks of concrete, depths of large foundations and whatnot that are being ground out to be removed. And so the removal process for solar is fairly simple and straightforward and less intrusive than other major infrastructures, roads, housing developments, major industrial centers and whatnot. And so while there isn't necessarily a long track record of solar projects being removed in this country because many of the utility scale solar projects have not reached the end of their useful life yet. I think there are a lot of examples over the last several decades of much heavier industries successfully removing facilities that are far more intensive on the ground than this project would be.
So nobody really knows at the end if there's going to be contamination to the soil or if there's going to be any.
We have the baseline. Well, I think, sir, that's an excellent question. I think, again, we thought about this in the conditions. So testing, number 13. The reason we're going to do a pre-construction baseline is so we know the status of the soil at that time. Now, I think everybody knows this, but if we were to find contaminants, we have a duty to report that to IDEM. I don't think we're going to find any, by the way. But we're not trying to shirk any legal responsibility there. If we find them, we got to go talk to IDEM and figure out what to do about them. But we have this pre-construction baseline, and then we have a post-construction baseline. And again, if there's contaminants, we have a duty, and it says right here, the project will make a report to the Indiana Department of Environmental Management and if required by law. So I guess we're just making the assumption something will come out of this testing. We certainly hope not. But we have a duty to report it and address it. I think that's what I'm trying to emphasize. So that's number 13.
And again, I think it's important to remember the context that we're discussing this in. It's a solar project. And so in terms of the risk of the materials out there to actually contaminate soil is little to no risk in terms of, again, we're talking about galvanized steel poles, and we're talking about solar panels out there and copper wiring, things that are easily removable and don't have a track record of causing contamination in the soil, water, that type of stuff. Again, I want to focus it on what we're actually proposing to build as a solar project, and not something that contains liquids that can leak, things that can get out into the air and whatnot. But again, we're providing the condition of pre-construction soil testing so that you're not just taking our word, but there's a verifiable method to prove that throughout the life of the project, during and after decommissioning of the project as well.
So let's play worst case scenario. And worst case is it goes bankrupt in X amount of years and exceeds the bond, and there's still cleanup to be done. And the county will have to get involved, and then they're gonna, who is financially, since the lease, is it gonna fall back on the landowners?
Yeah.
Or is it gonna fall back on the taxpayers?
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah,
the goal now.
So there's two things, and maybe Mary could supplement this, but first off, there is a lease that makes this obligation. So again, if there's any assignment or somebody else doing it, it's still subject to that condition that they do that. So whoever that is that's benefiting from that lease. But also in this, I just want to highlight again, this is a condition, but it's tucked down in there. The cost of the construction is in the irrevocable guarantee letter of credit. That 100% is going to be put in there in an account in an amount reasonably acceptable to the county, which is a third-party licensed registered engineer is going to evaluate that and then update that. So it's not us making up the
Right,
amount.
but look how inflation's happened in the last 4 years. And we're looking at this at every 5 years. So there is a strong possibility things could go up 30%. If we just go back 4 years, and you had the assessment done in 5 years ago. There's no way 5 years ago that the cost at the level they were then would cover today's costs. So there is a realistic possibility, in worst case scenario, that it's going to go past the bond.
Yeah.
And if it goes past the bond, is it 100% going to landowners? And if it does go to landowners and they walk away from it and say, no, just take the land, then does it fall on the taxpayer?
Great question. I just spoke to Michael about this. Many county ordinances require 120% bond, meaning not just what a third-party person says, oh, okay, if the cost is, making up numbers, 10 million, your bond has to be 10 million. What I'm going to suggest, and Michael's agreed, is that we offer into the record 120%, because many ordinances around the state have that number. So at least there's that 20% buffer. So if it actually costs more than what the third-party engineer says, the bond has to be 120% of that estimate, not 100. So I think that's one thing we can offer. The other thing is, again, we have to remember that this updating every 5 years is meant to address inflation. And I am happy to work with Patrick to make sure that this decommissioning document is very clear that the baseline goes up with inflation every 5 years. And again, the companies that provide these bonds, by the way, I mean, they're huge insurance companies. They're like AIG, they're Chase Bank. It's not Orion Insurance Company. I mean, and typically, by the way, these bonds are placed with multiple companies. So if one, let's say AIG files bankruptcy, you still got Chase Bank, you still got Farmers Insurance. My point is that there's a tiering of this security that's provided to the county. And that's something, by the way, we do at our expense. And Patrick, if I need to make that clear in the document, I will. We don't expect to impose the cost of evaluation on the county. But secondly, that we've got to work closely with your current county attorney, whatever, 25 years from now. And that's why we put a notice provision in, so that we have to tell the county before the bond ever expires. County, the bond's expiring in 90 days, so that future county leaders such as yourself have some heads up about this and a calendaring, so that there's always sort of this tiered level of protection.
Real quick, does that go to the county commissioners or the planning and zoning?
We can do both.
Right. And the other thing to point out is that bond is not released until decommissioning is completed. So it's not as if, year 35, the project is done, we're ready to decommission, the bond goes away once decommissioning starts, that full amount is in place until the county says, yes, the project has been decommissioned as well. So that security remains in place. As we propose from start of construction, actually prior to start of construction is how we propose the condition that is in your pamphlet, all the way through the end and completion of decommissioning as well, to further ensure that it's done properly and there are funds in place that it's done 100% as the plan will dictate.
But real quick, we got the bond covered, but let's say it still exceeds the bond, does it go to the landowners?
It's on their land. So I would argue
Well,
yes.
I would
but
say
we-
our lease agreements with the landowners identify them of those costs. So ultimately, it's still the project that is responsible for the end cost of decommissioning in that case.
Right, but he's asking if the project goes bankrupt, then where does that put the landowners?
Well, it still would be in bankruptcy court, but it still would be either the bond would cover that and where the project company, even during bankruptcy, still has to be responsible throughout the bankruptcy proceedings for the cost of that.
Well, and I think these are all really great questions and it's complicated. But we have to remember that you have an asset that's producing power on an ongoing basis under contracts. So there's no company that's going to own this project that's going to walk away because they'll be sued big time. But secondly, they're making money off these contracts. So bankruptcy is pretty unlikely in this fact pattern. Would you agree with that?
Well, I was more concerned as technology we're at the fastest pace in technology. And to think 30 years from now, this is going to be a viable energy source to use this amount of acres. I would think we might have a different energy source because 30 years ago, we would have never thought about this at all. So I'm looking about that hopefully technology keeps moving forward and we find a different energy source. And if we do, then, and the government decides, well, we don't want to fund this anymore or support it, then where are we at? Then the companies could be holding the bag or the landowners or whoever. I just want to make sure that the taxpayers and other residents in this county aren't looking at a problem here as we move forward in development.
Yep. Excellent questions and a very fair concern. I think it might be helpful for you all in the public to better understand how our industry works in general in relation to sourcing of power generation resources. So something very unique to renewable energy projects is that the project is not going to be built unless there's a long-term power purchase agreement in place. On average, on solar projects, which is very unique to both solar and wind projects, unlike coal or natural gas projects, is that we enter into a contract with, let's say it's Duke at the end of the day, whatever the customer is. Those typically last for, again, 15 to 25 years at a piece, in which case the project is mandated to sell a certain amount of electricity 365 days a year over that period of time at a set cost. That's one of the big advantages in terms of why a utility or a power customer chooses to do that, because they lock in the price for 2 to 3 decades, essentially. The flip side of that is that that company is obligated to pay for that generation and take that power regardless of what happens. If a new cheaper energy source comes along, that's part of the risk that they're taking from a financial perspective, is that they are obligated to take power from the facility that facility generates and pay a certain amount. And so there has not been an instance in the United States of the ability for a utility under that structure to back out and say, well, we found a cheaper power source, so we're going to cancel your contract. There goes the project. That's not how it works in terms of how these projects are financed in general. And the other thing I just wanted to point out, because this is a pretty common refrain, the United States does not have a national energy policy. So this project is not built whether or not a particular tax credit or federal DOE energy goal or policies in place. That has not really existed. There are tax credits that this project can take part of. But that stuff goes through pretty rigorous, complex IRS rules and whatnot. So it's not as if the administration changes, and if this project is utilizing, it's called the production tax credit or the investment tax credit, that it just overnight goes away with a change from Congress or the administration. There aren't really good examples of that. This project is not being subsidized by federal policy or state policy. There is a very limited set of tax credits and accelerated depreciation, which we can get really into the weeds if you want to get wonky, that this takes care of. So we are not concerned about if the whims of state government or the federal government changes in terms of what they want to see built in the future, if that makes sense.
Okay. Any other questions?
I know everybody wants to get out of here, but I want to ask you one more thing. Tax abatement. Why do you have to ask for one?
It's a good question, and it would be less complicated if we didn't have to do it, but essentially the reason why is projects such as these are in a competitive market. So we compete with other solar projects, other generation resources, all throughout the state of Indiana, in Kentucky, and all the neighboring states. If the price of our power is more expensive than our competition, project doesn't get built. And so it has been common practice in the state of Indiana for a majority of generation projects to pursue a tax abatement. And so essentially what we're trying to do is ensure the financial viability and competitiveness of this project to get to the point where we can bid into a RFP, which is often how these projects enter into long-term contracts. They're competitive bidding processes so that we can win that and the project gets built. And so that's why this project is going to attempt to see if the county would be amenable to an abatement. As part of that abatement, I will point out what we have proposed, because it's a public record, there's an economic development agreement, in which case we are proposing to share the savings of that abatement with the county in the first 10-year period in the form of payments to the county rather than through property taxes. But the reason why we're doing it is because everybody else does it, and we have to stay competitive to ensure that we can have a financially competitive project along with the rest of the pack. That's the base of it, if I'm being blunt.
So the tax numbers you threw out, 30% lower tax, all the stuff you put in the package, does that have those tax abatement numbers already taken out, or are they still in there?
It's modeled in there. So the tax numbers that have been proposed are assuming that the tax abatement that we are proposing to pursue is completed. So
The county council.
if the county council doesn't approve the tax abatement, the property tax dollars that we've submitted as public record would be going up. So we're trying to take a very conservative approach. They're not going to get lower because we're not asking for a larger abatement than what's already been proposed. But at the end of the day, if the county doesn't approve an abatement, those tax dollars go up, and we see if the project at the end of the day can be competitive, and that's on us to deal with.
But if they don't approve it, are you saying because all your competitors are doing it that the project possibly won't move forward?
It's a risk. That's right. Yeah.
It just perhaps makes it less competitive than other projects, meaning they can bid a lower cost of energy. So another way to think about the abatement is that that money, that savings isn't used by Orion to enrich Orion. It's used to bid a lower price for the price of energy. So it's essentially, if the county approves it, it's essentially a pass-through that allows the project to achieve cheaper energy, which also benefits ratepayers across the state, because cheaper energy has a trickle-on effect to the ratepayers as well.
I know a lot of people want to speak, and I feel like we're dragging this out, but I thought there was a wholesale rate that the utilities had to buy the electric from. There wasn't a real negotiation. When somebody put a solar on their house and they had excess electricity, and they had to buy that at the wholesale rate route. They couldn't take advantage of those households or small farms who went on their own and did it by themselves. Is that, you don't fall under that same
That's residential.
category?
No, so what we're referencing is specific to residential and sometimes small commercial systems. On the utility side, it is project by project in terms of the cost of that energy produced. So we produce a negotiated price that gets bought at, cost X. The coal plant produces its own cost of energy that they're into a contract. I know it's utility owned, so it's a little bit more complicated, but that is produced at cost Y. A solar project at the northern part of the state, selling to the same utility that this project might, is probably going to be selling their power at a different price. So on the utility scale side, it's very different economic setup than on the residential, small scale, or commercial side of things. So there's not a base rate that a utility scale solar project does. Yeah.
It's a competitive process.
Right. Yep.
Any other questions?
You mentioned if you applied for abatement, just explain this to me a little bit. So if you had got the abatement, then the taxpayers would have to pay that, their taxes, and you're going to give money to the county? Is that
No, let me try to explain it. Okay, so the way these, it's called an economic development agreement. And again, only the county council, as you know, can grant an abatement. What the contract would say is the project receives an abatement, and let's say the benefit of that abatement, making up a number, is
I think it's the PETA-BOA board, I think you would go to.
No, ma'am.
You go to the council?
Go to the county council. Let's say over a 10-year period, the project saves $10 million by not having to pay taxes. Okay. Typically, this is a negotiation. And by the way, the county's already indicated, and I say county, I mean commissioners and council. We're allowed to discuss these things with them, as you can imagine. They have pretty sophisticated financial advisors. Baker Tilly, other companies do this work, and they literally get their calculator and figure out what's the savings to the project, what do we as the county want in return. So for example, if the abatement is a 10-year abatement, what the county will typically negotiate, a county that we've done this with, is we want earlier money. The county assessor is looking for money, right? So they don't want to wait 10 years to see the benefit, or even 5 years. So what these contracts typically say is they're early year economic development payments. So let's say those payments are made over 3 years in the early years of the project as the abatement is winding down. Because you have to remember, traditional abatement, 100%, 90%, 80%. So as those early abatement years where there's a lot of abatement benefit, the project would make economic development payments to try to make up for that. And those payments are paid directly to the county itself. These have been done in many counties around Indiana in the last 15 years. State Board of Accounts doesn't have a problem with it. And these counties, whether it's White County, Benton County, we do business in Benton County where the first wind farm is, have used the money for all kinds of things. They've bought fire trucks, they've paid for an economic development person, they've funded school programs. There's great discretion on how these monies can be spent. And it's a dialogue really that we're not so much a party to, but the council and the commissioners would talk about what's the best use? Is there a bridge we want to rebuild? All kinds of things. So it's a way to give back so that the benefit of the abatement, instead of being worth 10 million, may at the end of the day only be worth 6 million. But again, and you get into present value of that benefit. So I think the way I would emphasize this is early year money to the county.
But I want to be very specific to
Yep.
your question, which is, I think what you asked is, does the Jefferson County taxpayer pay for our abatement? That's not how it works. So arguably, let's say we were able to negotiate an abatement, get it approved by the county without an EDA tied to it. So we're not basically paying back some of those savings back to the county. So even if there was an abatement, we're talking about the addition of approximately $800 million of new tax base in the county. So the way it works in Indiana, and I'm not a tax expert, so I will, just preface it with that. But generally the way it works in Indiana is, Jefferson County can only take in so many property tax dollars. It's capped based off of the millage and the levies that the county has approved. Anything in excess with that means that the county can't capture funds. So what happens is that because of all that new property tax base, it actually lowers the tax burden on existing taxpayers. That's why Amanda in her presentation earlier said, even if the abatement gets passed, not counting in economic development agreement dollars as we propose that then pay back to the county, that would lower, given what property taxes are today, and that can obviously change over time, but under today's property tax regime, that if you were living in Saluda Township, your top property tax bill would be reduced by nearly 50%. Jefferson County-wide, property tax bills would be reduced by 30%. That is because, again, there's a cap in terms of the pure dollars that the county can actually take in. So every property tax dollar that the project pays means that is one less dollar that gets appropriated to every other property tax payer, if that all makes sense.
I have one more question. I noticed as going through this that you had your deeds with the parcels. A lot of the deeds that I looked at had people's properties in it, and I see your setbacks on those. So I'm assuming in these lease agreements that they're only getting paid for what's the solar panels are on. I didn't understand that. I've seen lease agreements with other things, but this is all new to me, the solar farms. So when I'm looking at these deeds that's presented with these parcel numbers, some of these have houses in it. Can you explain that to me, how this all works with that?
Sure. So I think probably the easiest way to think about this, well, the landowners have negotiated these contracts with us individually. But typically the landowner gets paid for what's within the site, the fence. And so oftentimes they will exclude portions of their property for development, like a house, a residence. They may want to keep certain portions available, like woods in the back to go hunting. They may want to keep part of their farms open to continue farming in those areas as well. So it depends landowner to landowner, but typically the landowner is paid for any acreage within a project fence is the best way to think of it.
So what you presented to me then is not accurate because you can change the meets and bounds with what you've put in there. I'm thinking of other things that I've seen as far as leases and projects that went into things. Usually you have a diagram of what meets and bounds are and that acreage, and that is just what is in the program. As for this, I'm not seeing that. I'm just seeing a whole picture of somebody's deed, if that makes sense.
So we do provide an as-built survey once construction is complete, and we provide that to the county so they know exactly the meets and bounds locations of all the infrastructure in place.
We will get something different, is that what?
No, so what you have now is the site plan that has the locations for all the fences project-wide, and so those will not change. Those are set in place, and so the answer is no, those fences are all in place. They are a subset of the deeded acreage themselves, but what we've presented is the panels within a project fence, and the project fence stays fixed.
So you have no description?
Well, we have the site plan. We have a site plan.
We submitted a whole site plan.
We'll submit an as-built survey. We've seen this with projects that have been constructed where the county assessor goes out, literally walks the fence line. And, there's this law in Indiana, by the way, that land cannot be abated. And what's interesting about that is that what the law says is the land assessment increases for anything within the fence line. Doesn't say exactly, but that's how it's been applied by most assessors. So that can't be abated. So let's say you're in the Southern District. There's 3 districts in Indiana. We're in the Southern. I think the land tax goes up about 5 times. So if the land tax today is based on ag of, let's say that's $1,200 an acre, multiply that by 5, that is actual increased revenue to the county. Now it's subject to these property tax caps, but that can't be abated. So there is part of the sort of value add, if you will, that is not abatable. And most assessors that have looked at these projects, and I think Jasper County is the best example, have looked at it from, we are going to raise that rate inside the fence line and by whatever that statutory amount is, because in the north, it's a higher percentage. I know I might be confusing you, but it's really up to the assessor what he or she wants to assess as solar improved land versus ag land. And again, most assessors have said, well, I think the fence is pretty good line of demarcation because it's clear what that solar activity goes on inside the fence, which we've tried to locate in our site plan, versus outside the fence, which would be pollinators and mowing of grass and such. But Michael.
And please let us know if we're not answering your question, just so we're understanding it as well. So
I'm looking at an example would be classified forest. When that goes in, there is a legal description which such out the houses and things like that that you're talking about. With here, it's not like that. The deeds are the whole acreage of what somebody owns with the houses and everything in there. So what you're saying is the assessor will have to go out.
Microphone, please.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Sorry. I guess what I'm getting at is I've seen classified forests where that land is going into a program. The exceptions of the houses and what they want to keep out is accepted out of that. And I have a legal description of meets and bounds of what that is going in. What I'm seeing here is just a deed of 60 acres of somebody's property. What I'm seeing here that you're presenting is 3,000 some acres, but only so much of that acreage is in solar panels. So I'm assuming that when the assessor goes out, she will, what you're saying, will assess what's in the fence line of that property. But you guys are showing me that this program, you're putting this much in it, is, I guess, so we're not getting a description of just that area.
you are. So, and I'm going to pass this off to Justin real quickly. Let me just really high level. So there are the solar leases that cover the parcel that landowners have agreed to participate in. And that may include parcels, whole parcels, portions of parcels, exclusion areas and whatnot. From that subset of parcels, then what we have provided is a site plan that shows exactly where facilities are proposed to be located on each individual parcel that may or may not include the entire parcel.
You're doing no survey.
No, there is a survey. There is an as-built provided as part of the building permit as well. That there's an ALTA survey provided prior to construction that verifies where every single facility is going to be. But at the land use approval stage, and maybe Justin, this is what you can explain, in terms of the level that we provide that suffices for, essentially BZA and land use approvals. Justin, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, so these agreements, and I don't know that you actually, I think it's just terminology too, maybe, but it's not my understanding we've submitted deeds, but there are parcel numbers.
There were just exhibits and then had parcel numbers and people's, it
That's
was
right.
not broke down as leases for individuals.
That's right, and that is translated to the site plans that we've submitted. So the leases between each individual, the parcel that they own needs to be noticed, right? Like we went through that at the beginning. The individuals involved are all part, so the parcel is relevant in that sense. But where the project actually is this larger site plan, that you guys have copies of, and then there's as-built surveys, which meets and bounds description. Those leases typically will have that same thing. That lease is going to say, we're leasing only this part of my parcel. And it may be all of the parcel, right? There may be a section of this, but that lease is going to define it. Those have been translated into the site plan. And when those are built, those are going to have meets and bounds description. So the site plan is the translation of those pieces to show where those acreage actually lie. Does that make sense?
And just finally to hit on your question, that there is another gating checkpoint in this whole permitting process, and that's the location permit. And so there is a full a survey conducted of the entire site, meets and bounds descriptions, an Alta survey, so it's very in-depth. And that is provided to the, I believe it's probably the building inspector at that time. And that, as part of that condition of that permit, that location permit. And that can be then the meets and bounds description that, let's say, the assessor uses to do the tax assessment on the project itself, if that makes sense.
All right, I think that's got all the board's questions at this time. We might have some more later. But right now, we're going to move over to public comment. And just to give you a sense of the BZA, we laid out on everybody's table. You might have to pass that around, but it's the finding of facts. And the finding of facts is what we have to determine if this passes or doesn't. Does it meet this? Do it, whatever the case. But these are the things that we have to consider. The money thing, that's not our deal. We wanted to get some questions answered, but that's not what we are to talk about or make the decision based off of. So if you get up to speak, you can speak about whatever you want. But it would be nice if you could tie it into one of these 6 finding of facts. But like I said, you're free to say anything. So we've got a list of 47 people that would like to speak, and we're going to start by, we're going to name all, we're going to go down the list, and 3 or 4 people, we're going to name their names, and they'll stand in line. And the first person to speak, when they're done speaking, when they're done speaking, we're going to name another person. That person will get in line behind the 3 to try to keep this thing moving, so we're not waiting for people to move in and out of from their seats. So yes, thank you. Please address them to us, the board. Ultimately, we're making the decision. If you have questions, then allow us to ask those questions for you. But we would like to get through as many people as possible and then ask questions at the end. Obviously, we've got an hour. I got to note that we have to be out of here by 9, not 9:20 or 9:30. So the meeting will stop at 9, but we are going to allow everybody to speak. If it doesn't get done tonight, it will get done at our next meeting. But ultimately, I want everybody to get it off their chest. And come back, and if you come back with other questions, but I promise you, no decision by this board will be made until everybody gets to speak that wants to speak. And I know we've asked a lot of questions, drug this out, but we had some questions we wanted to get answered. So, but I promise you, everybody will get to speak that wants to.
There are several overflow, and now if there's room, I don't know if you want to say that there's room for you to come up so that they can get up there.
The overflow people, that's why we're going to have a list. Okay. So though they have time to get out of the overflow, that we're going to have 3 or 4 people standing out on deck, we'll call it.
If it would be okay with everybody, I know that there's a list, but there are some people here who have health issues, and they've waited a very long time, so if you mind, if you have a health issue, could they speak first?
Well, what if they can't speak tonight because of health issues? We'll get them the next meeting or what have you. I want to stick with the list and the way we've got it to move forward. So, Taylor, do you want to go through the first 3 or 4 people to speak?
I'll call up the first 3 people to speak. The first one will be Caleb King. The second one will be Jake Calderbank. And the third will be Gary Good. After Caleb King is done, I will call the next person in line to get into the queue.
And when you speak, please give your full name and address where you live.
Just a quick note, the second name on that, Jay Calderbank, we're all in the same group. We're with Southern Indian FC. So that number 2, if you want to call maybe the next person down, they can get up. That would work as well. We're both going at the same time. Yeah. Hello, my name is Caleb King, and I live at 3140 Betwood Circle South Drive. We're players with Southern Indiana FC, and we're here to voice our support for Orion and their Idlewild Solar project. Orion has been an active and involved sponsor for our team and for our success. As players, it means a lot to have people who believe in us and support us, and we believe Orion does both of these things wonderfully. If Orion brings to Jefferson County the level of commitment that we have experienced firsthand, then we know how great you guys will benefit from them as well. So please vote yes to bring Orion on your team for future success. Vote yes for this Idlewild project. We're also not only proud to have Orion as a sponsor, but as an active partner in reaching hundreds of kids. Our program hosts soccer camps and clinics for children who want to learn more about our sport. With Orion's help, we've been able to invite and teach children with little to no means. We respectively ask the board to bring Orion into your community and let them, through your tax revenues, reach families and children for the benefits of this project. Our team is also here tonight because we believe in Orion's mission for clean energy and for a better future for our world. Soccer is not our only passion. Being good stewards of our planet is just as important. Solar energy is indeed clean, inexpensive, and necessary for our society to thrive. It does not pollute like air or coal, and it doesn't threaten communities with potential radiation. Thank you for hearing us out. Please vote yes on this project.
I'm going to call Gail Forine and Carlos May.
Okay, my name's Gary Good, 8719 South Highway 62. I've been in this area for ever since I was probably 10 years old. I started farming when I was still in high school, and I'm looking for an alternative way to help my farm. And I think I have found it here. Some people may say they think, you know, I've been called greedy for signing up. I've used conservation farming for a good while. The fellow from, I believe, Nebraska took my thunder because I've got the pollinator program in my farm already. And I think it's good for the soil. I think that this company would be good for our community. They have already showed that. Some people think that they're buying our love, I guess, or sign us up. I disagree with that. I want the zoning board to really look at it hard. And we'll be all right either way. We go back to being neighbors, maybe, hopefully. And I think the project can help our county. We need tax dollars to help our schools. And you know, us farmers that's bought and paid for these farms, we do have rights as long as it's, you know, I agree that if I'm hurting my neighbor, I wouldn't be for it. I just don't feel like I am. And I hope you can vote yes for this project. Thank you.
I would like to thank the board, the zoning board, for having us. And I appreciate being at the meeting. And as far as I'm concerned, we don't need this. It's really damn clear. I'm almost 80 years old and I've never had my house not lit with electric lights on. Do we really need it?
Richard Bellows.
Hi, I'm Carlos May Jr. and I live at 8338 South Painesville Road. And I wrote a little paper here I'd like to read to you. The title is Solar Energy in My Neighborhood. Solar electrical energy is in our future. A solar farm is better than a hog lot. Solar energy production is better than coal burning power plants. It's my land and I have a right to choose. A solar farm is better than a hog lot. A solar farm doesn't smell bad like a hog lot. A solar farm looks better because it isn't muddy like a hog lot. And those hogs are noisier than a solar inverter because of the clunk of those feeders' doors when they feed. Solar energy production is better than coal-burning power plants. Solar energy production doesn't emit pollutants like coal-burning power plants. Connecting the solar energy to the power grid will reduce the load on the coal-burning power plants.
Hey guys, can you give it some respect like everybody else is? Really? Come on, guys.
Just exercise emotional control and listen. That's effective listening skill. Might add that. Okay, last paragraph here. It's my land and I have a right to choose. I have the right to choose if I want to raise crops, raise a garden, cut wood, hunt game, put in a hog farm or other. No one should be allowed to stop me from using my land the way I choose. Solar electrical energy is in the way of the future, and I hope the board chooses to elect it in. Thank you.
We're going to take a brief pause real quick. I just want to make sure that Gail Horine, were they able to speak?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to check up names as I go. Easton Smith, are you in line? Okay. And may I ask what your name is?
Okay, well, you called Carlos, so Carlos Senior had asked me to read his, he had to leave. So I didn't know that,
Okay.
which Carlos it was.
So I have a Carlos May and I have a Carlos May Jr. Was
Yeah,
the junior
Carlos May.
just spoke?
Okay, so
You're going for Carlos May.
yes, well, he had asked me to go ahead and take his spot only, but I was gonna ask permission to do that because he had to leave.
That's fine.
Is that okay?
I just wanted to make sure I was going by the list and I was
Right.
getting everybody. It was kind of hard to keep.
Oh,
track of
I
everything.
understand.
I'm gonna call the next person up, Yvonne Thomas, and then you may
Okay.
proceed.
And I'm Carrie Vaughn. I live at 8513 Balmer Drive. I'm the co-founder. Microphone. Yep, my bad, I'm sorry. I'm the co-founder of the Solar Energy Alliance, which was formed in the spring to support the Idlewild project in both Jefferson and Clark counties. Our purpose is to provide accurate and fact-checked information about utility solar projects, as well as represent the silent majority that is often overlooked and forgotten when a very small number of opponents become loud, like a squeaky wheel looking to get greased. We know it's harder to publicly support something than it is to be against something. Just look at other meetings such as homeowner association meetings. No one shows up to tell the board they're doing a great job. People only show up to complain about their neighbors barking dogs or leaving out the trash can too long. Tonight, the silent majority is very much represented here tonight and part of our alliance. If you're with us, please stand and show our alliance. You don't mind? Thank you. If you can stand. Thank you, Mr. Jeff. Our Facebook page is growing every day. We have nearly 600 followers, and our rally last week saw more than 70 Jefferson County citizens participating. And in my hand, I have in this folder over 400 petitions signed, and I'd like to present that to you. I don't know how you want me to do that. And on behalf of the members of the silent majority of Jefferson County, I respectfully ask you to support this great opportunity for our community by voting yes tonight. And also would like to present, it's a nice blown up petition for you. Thank you all so much.
Wes Thomas.
This will be put on the record.
My name's Eston Smith. I live at 6557 South Saluda Painesville Road in Hanover, Indiana. 75 years old. I've lived in Saluda Township all my life. My son and I own and operate 240 acres in the township. We also manage two nonprofit organizations within the township. The Chelsea Jubilee Park Association, we just celebrated our 158th year. The other association, and what I really wanted to talk about today, was the Mount Zion Cemetery Association. The earliest known burial took place in 1847. Our family members have managed the cemetery for 55 years, served by my uncle, my aunt, my cousin, myself, for a total of 100 years of service. The cemetery exists on 3.8 acres. We currently have 743 residents and property owners. Civil War, numerous World War I, World War II, Korean veterans, all of whom have a vested interest in your future decisions. Our concerns are, with the current 743 residents and property owners who want to wake up every morning surrounded on three sides by solar panels producing 45 decibels of constant noise. We don't feel like we have the right to speak for others. But in this case, if it's not I and the board of directors, who is it? We firmly believe that those residents would agree that the answer is no. I'm a bit of a history buff, especially when it comes to the community. I've researched one of the older documents that I have, an 1890 tax assessment book for Saluda Township, looking for descendants, families, friends, neighbors that reside in the cemetery. Here's what I found. Bowman, Barker, Benham, Consley, Bear, Davison, Hall, Hutzels, Stuckers, and Taylors. All of these people helped raise him. Also Jacob Bear, he started the first Mount Zion Methodist Church in a one-room cabin that's located on the current grounds of the cemetery in 1840. Payne was the founder of Paynesville. Lawson, a Civil War veteran. It took him years to get an $8 retirement from the government. I've tried to keep my comments focused on the cemetery and the 743 residents and property owners. We as an association made a promise to in 1927 to protect and care for. However, there's also two churches in Paynesville. Mount Zion, established in 1880, and Paynesville Christian Church, established in 1907. You'll no longer be able to drive to church on Sunday morning, north, south, east, or west, without driving through a tunnel with solar panels. I've tried to provide some history information and a sense of community. If this moves forward, I believe it will have disastrous effects on the future for the residents, the churches, the cemetery, and the community.
Reuben Henderson.
Richard Fellows. I'm located in Clark County, Indiana, and we're the kind of forgotten ones down there, I suppose. But I just want to be sure that you know that we farm.
It's not turned on.
Microphone's turned off. My name's Richard Fellows. I live down in Clark County, Indiana, right next to Marble Hill Road. Our family has several hundred acres of general ag district zone ground, the AG. And I want to thank you all very much for taking the opportunity to be able to speak to you, invited us down. But one thing about it, we were not told about this meeting until yesterday. And we had to sign a note. My son, or my brother, signed a note that he said that he knew about it. in time, or like my nephew got notified in time. But anyhow, it sure wasn't the 10 days. Sorry about the note. But anyhow, again, thank you for allowing us to speak. And we've all worked together to try to make sure we got zoning the way it should be so that we have protected areas in our community. And I appreciate you guys developing that unified developed ordinance that's talked about here on this document that you got. The special exemption should not be allowed. We got zoning such as it should be. We have farming out there that's defined as producing food and fiber for people. It's not producing electricity. So if we got GA and AG zoned areas, we ought to keep them that way. One of the things that you all talk about doing here in your UDO was protecting the public health, safety, and morals. And in Clark County, particularly, a bullet point is to protect the character and stabilization of farming. And again, I think that's probably your objective. And I'd like for you to continue to really enforce keeping farming as we enjoy it. I want to work together, amazing how we got two parties that were for and against. It should have never been that way. If these people hadn't come in from California or wherever else states are from, we would not be having this discussion. We really don't need it. We'll get along fine without it. And just want you to be sure to know that. A couple of thoughts. Please don't consider this special exemption for solar. And another one I got is zoning is to protect the land use, not the rights. We all got rights. We can put it in CRP and protect the soil. And we also could sell it if you're not interested in keeping the farm. And again, I mentioned that food and fiber is produced by farming for the betterment of society. And why would we even consider a special exemption for solar? And if you do a little bit of research on solar, there is heavy metals. Silicon is used in the changing of solar into electricity. I'm not a chemist, but you can look into some of the products or some of the organic matters. You can call them organic, but arsenic is actually used in some of these toxic materials are in these solar panels, maybe in a low amount, but please put an end to the animosity between neighbors. Trying to get the GA zoned areas into a different zoning, and please help us to get along as neighbors. I appreciate you letting me go over 3 minutes down Clark County. I got a clock running. I would have got half of this.
Let me call the next one, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
The next one is Kellen Kless.
All right, go ahead. My name is Yvonne Thomas, and I live at 3665 West Prospect Road, Hanover, Indiana, and I have been for 54 years. Tonight, I know we will hear from the opponents of the solar farms, and I respect their views and opinions as I would like for them to respect mine. It is my wish as a member of Saluda Township in Jefferson County that we look at the proposed solar farms in a positive, forward-looking opportunity for our beloved community. There are 3 main positives that I would like to point out. The first one will be protecting our land. The second one will be meeting the demands for more electrical power. And the third will be the financial gain for our community. The first, we need to protect our land from the industry and housing needs that are creeping up on us. Just 20 to 25 miles down the road in Clark County, there are thousands of acres of land that's been transformed into a sea of massive warehouses housing and apartment complexes, which in turn has led to the second need of more electricity. So in addition to the commercial need for power, each and every one of us solely depend on power all the time. As it has been highly researched and noted, the coal-fired power plants are aging, and no matter how hard they try, their emission affects our climate and the constant demand of mining and stripping coal from our beloved earth. And heaven forbid if we ever have to think of nuclear power again in this area. Solar farms are a positive answer. They harvest a free natural resource without causing any negative effects to our beautiful community and climate. Is it going to change what we see? Yes, it is. It's going to change what we look at every day. Instead of looking at corn or soybeans planted right up to the edges of our roads, we will be eventually looking at a tree line fence set way back off of the road with the solar panels behind them. I don't know about all of you, but I would much prefer to see that versus a sea of houses and warehouses, which would have a huge negative impact on our schools and infrastructure, which leads to the third positive. As a community, we must look at the huge financial gain that each of us will experience, along with our lower taxes. The Southwestern school system will receive much needed financial assistance for repair and maintenance, educational materials, wages for our teachers and all the other employees at the school system. And wow, wouldn't it be awesome to have all of the uniforms for all of our athletes and band members paid for once, instead of all of these students having to raise the money to buy their own uniforms? And wouldn't it be awesome to have an auditorium in our school system? As well as maybe a proper entrance to Southwestern schools with a beautiful foyer, like many of the other school systems around this state have. In addition to having finances to repair and maintain our country roads and the infrastructure without adding the tremendous additional traffic from houses and warehouses. And lastly, the money our little township will receive for improving fire protection, community activities, and the help for our neighbors in need. In closing, please be positive. Quit being negative, and every time somebody says something you don't like, whoop. Let's not do that. Let's be positive. Think of the good aspects of this and what it can help our community. We're going to protect our land and our community from the fastly advancing industries and housing, address the need for producing more electricity while protecting our environment and not adding to the negative effects to our climate. And lastly, the much needed financial gain for our school, fire department, infrastructure, and most importantly, helping our community members and families in need. Let's all be positive and vote yes. Thank you.
Helen had to leave.
I'm not sure I can follow that.
Just 1 second. I had called on Reuben Henderson. I think that's how it's spelled on here. I'm just trying to read handwriting, so I apologize.
It's Robin.
Rowan?
Robin.
Robin, okay, I'm so sorry. Robin Henderson is next. I got notified that Kellen had to leave.
He had to leave.
Okay.
I think Robin left too.
And the next one on the list is Robin Mingione, yep.
Go ahead and do another.
And then we'll go ahead and call Anna Smith.
If they don't show up, I get to talk longer. I've been to, my name is Wes Thomas. I live at 3665 West Prospect Road, Hanover. Farming operation is 3998 Slough Hill. And I've been to a lot of these meetings and listened to people, and I've heard so many chicken little skies falling ideas or beliefs of other people. But I have a hard time really accepting a lot of it. This would be the first time I've said anything about it. But, and then I heard about the bees not being able to find their way back to the hives. I've heard about the heat off of the solar panels is going to change the weather patterns. I've heard that you're going to pour the ground full of concrete. And my daughter that lives in Maryland called me last night, and she said the latest news on the internet was that from putting the poles in the ground to mount the panels was going to cause echoing in the ground. I don't know about that. But I do know there'll be no smoke from these, no fumes, very, very little noise, no need to change all the infrastructure, having that expense. And contrary to what a lot of you believe, there will be no contaminants in those panels that's going to contaminate the ground forever. A lot of that stuff is, I think Orion has done a wonderful job at the last 2 or 3 meetings of going through this stuff item by item and explaining it. And I almost guarantee you there'll be part of the comments up here tonight about stuff they clearly went over and they still ask the same questions. I don't know if they just don't believe it or they're not listening or whatever. And the tax rate in Slough Township could be down by 50% in just a few years. And I know some of these people sitting in this room, I've heard them bitch about their taxes every year, going up, can't afford to pay my taxes. Now you got an opportunity to lower them by 50% and you're acting like we're going to kill you. I don't understand. Money for the schools. The school always needs more money. And everybody, that's all, a lot of that is in your property taxes. And a lot of that's going to be taken care of. They should have plenty of money. And this is not going to happen in a year. It's going to be drawn out over a period of time, but they're still going to have the money to do those things. Getting the fire department in Slough Township, that's going to lower your home insurance. There's another savings too. Everybody says insurance is so high, I can't afford it. Well, when you get a fire department within so many miles of your home, you go on a different rate and your rate will be lower. Let me get my thoughts here. It's going to allow a lot of the family farms to stay in that family, not be broken up, not have to be pieced out here and there for a little subdivision here or subdivision over there to be able to keep their farms together. And they were talking earlier there about who buys the electricity or whatever. If they're producing a product for sale, to me, it doesn't matter who buys it. If I'm raising corn and soybeans, I just haul them to the granary. I don't know who bought that, where that corn and beans went or who got it, but I still sold it to them because I have something for sale. And if they've got energy to sell, they should be able to sell it to whoever they want to. And just remember, it really boils down to property rights. And I think we have a right to do it.
Dennis Weber. I'm not Robin Mangione, Youth County sit back down if you want. She texted me and said she had to leave. I'm not gonna be able to make the next meeting. I live out of town. She told me to take her place. Would it be all right if I spoke? Okay.
I need an address, so.
Yes, sir, I will provide it. I've got, a packet of documents for the board. Next one. Hello, my name is Olivia Vogel. I live at 2600 Newman Road, Lexington, Kentucky, 40515. I'm the daughter of Bob and Sue Klein of Klein Farms, Smyrna Township. I have been immersed in agriculture for my whole life, my raising and my chosen education and work. I'm a pretty green person. Both my husband and I are graduates of the University of Kentucky's College of Agriculture, Food and Environment, and I work in local foods and farming, and he in sustainable forestry. When we built our house last year, I got a quote on solar panels, and it's something I'd love to install when funds allow. Yet I am not supportive of this solar proposal. I believe the question you have before you tonight is, do you want to approve converting thousands of acres of prime and prime if drained farmland to industrial development? I don't believe that aligns with goal number 1 in the county's comprehensive plan to protect agricultural land. This project will drive up cash rent, and I've provided you with the recent Purdue publication substantiating my claim, document 1 in your packet. To make it even more impossible for the many young people in this county who wish to make a living in agriculture, but who must instead work off the farm. When the recent solar proposal in Smyrna Township that was to surround my family's farms went before City Council, I started to educate myself about industrial solar development. I kept an open mind. After many conversations, I found that I do not support it on USDA classified prime soil. I've provided a USDA definition of prime soil in your packet, document 2, but in summary, it's the best, and we are lucky enough to live on it. When the soil classifications were made in the late 70s, many argued the requirements for prime were too stringent. There are countless regulations from the federal government to protect our prime soil. I believe we do not have these protections yet for the solar industry because of its newness, but other countries are doing so, such as outlawing it altogether in Italy or making it be less than 40% of total farm coverage in France. Article in your packet, document number 3. Although several have mentioned the wetland in Saluda used 6 times in the preliminary hydrology analysis, I only see that 0.22 acres of the project are wetland. Document 4 in your packet, page 3 of the hydrology analysis. Unfortunately, the soil classification columns were left off the soil maps on the analysis. But I can tell you, because I too know how to use USDA Soil Web Survey, that about 22% of the project is on prime land and 76% on prime if drained farmland. I've included a map in your packet, document 2. I wanted to learn more about the prime if drained classification, so I reached out to the Indiana and Kentucky state soil scientists. Both responded, and I've included their emails, document 5 in your packet. John Allen, Indiana state soil scientist, says, "You are correct in your understanding that these soils are prime as long as they are drained. Most soil types in Indiana that fit that category have been tile drained for farming or influenced by nearby tile drains. The water table is maintained at a sufficient depth during the cropping system to allow cultivated crops common to the area to be grown." So what he's telling me is that it's pretty darn good. American Farmland Trust is doing lots of work in farmland preservation and has smart solar recommendations. I will read you 3 of them. Number 1, prioritize solar sitting on buildings and land not well suited for farming. Not so with this project. Number 2, safeguard the ability for land to be used in agriculture. You could argue that either way, but I'll argue not, because I don't think it's a temporary installation. Number 3, grow agrivoltaics for ag production to solar energy. So that's ag and solar coexisting, which I'm actually pretty interested in, but I believe that it's not so with this project. Right now, the research and development is just not there yet, and even as it does become available, some solar companies are not willing to spend the extra money on infrastructure, most commonly taller I-beams, to accommodate the spacing needed for equipment. Document number 3, substantiating that claim. In a conversation I had with the Nature Conservancy's Director of Ag for Kentucky and Tennessee, he says that TNC generally is not supportive of solar development on prime ag land. They do support well-planned solar emphasis on well planned. So in Kentucky, this means development of solar on former mine lands as the best example he had. I'm getting to the end, so stick with me. Most everyone agrees that prime soil is worth protecting. FDR said the nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. Although it is abundant in the great state of Indiana, it's not so everywhere, and we have the responsibility to protect it. I have gratitude that this project allows us to consider the importance of agriculture. It's a topic often ignored, but of utmost importance. I'm under no illusions that the farming culture in our current system are best for land, community, or farmers. Quite frankly, there are many weaknesses that we can finally acknowledge as a community. There is a need for a new path forward. In 2020, the taxpayer cost of aid to farmers was $28 billion. That's more than our nuclear forces budget, NASA, and children's healthcare, to name a few, yet our farms and food system are not thriving. The solar company may have said their vision is ag of the future. Perhaps if it goes through, it is the wealth of the next few years, but it sure isn't agriculture. I work in local foods and farming because I believe in its benefits for community, land, and health, and importantly, the farmer's wallet. If every household in this county, except for the 13% in poverty, purchased $100 a month from food from a local farmer, it would keep $13.5 million in our local farm economy. That is 32% of the market value of Jefferson County's farm products sold in 2022. And that's not counting industrial food purchasing. I believe we have a responsibility to do that. Finally, in the 1970s, when many of these landowners began their farming careers, Indiana's own Earl Butz was the Secretary of Agriculture at the time, and his mantra was get big or get out and plant fence row to fence row. And there are many in this county who have been successful at that in the belief that they are feeding the world, and I genuinely thank you for your hard work. I just think it's high time for a new vision. I don't think that vision should include selling our soil to people who will retire before this project is decommissioned and who see our home as a resource or utility to fuel excessive energy consumption and fatten their wallets.
Hello, my name is Anna Smith, Anna Marie Smith. My address is 8605 West, 650 South, Lexington, Indiana. Fellow citizens, neighbors, friends, and committee, as a nearly lifelong resident of Saluda Township and as an elected member of the Saluda Township Advisory Board, I'm deeply concerned about the proliferation of solar farms in our rural area. While I understand the importance of renewable energy, I strongly believe that these industrial scale projects threaten the very essence of Saluda, our beautiful rural community. Growing up in Saluda, I developed a profound appreciation for its natural splendor. Solar farms would forever alter our scenic landscapes, destroying habitats and disrupting wildlife corridors. Our community's character and charm are at stake. Furthermore, and most important to me, I worry in great abundance about the potential health risks associated with solar farms. Research suggests possible links between EMFs and migraine sufferers. I already suffer greatly from migraines. Many have followed me on my medical journey. I've suffered too long and fought too hard to get my life back. The proposed solar farm across from my property will glare directly at us as a rolling hillside with no coverage from the trees. It will follow the sun right into my property. I practice outside meditation, grounding, and relaxation techniques outside to combat my migraines. With the proposed solar fields across from my property, I will also be fighting noise pollution. The initial construction and maintenance process will be horrendous, as well as introducing constant noise throughout the day, leaving my peaceful, therapeutic homestead a solar hindrance to my well-being and potentially for my life. Section 7.8 of Ottawa's contract speaks of having the right to emit noise and that it will cause glare on neighboring properties. What compensation have I been offered for these horrendous impacts on my health and my family's well-being? None. Honestly, I don't want compensation for the threat to my everyday life. I want to live in a peaceful countryside that has been in my family for generations without these threats. The ongoing hum of these solar farms will be a horrible reminder of the visual ugliness, but also the harm to me and my peaceful therapeutic way of life. It will be gone. I fought a long, hard battle to find peace in my life and to allow me to be a working individual to support my family, as long as an elected official. And I want to represent those in my community that are not able to stand and speak for them as well. I do not need another unwanted obstacle to impair my quality of life. Only a select few will benefit financially from these proposed solar farms. The rest of us in Saluda will suffer. We must prioritize residents' well-being and consider the long-term consequences. Alternative solutions can be found instead of industrial solar farms. Prioritize residents' health, safety, and the quality of life. Let's protect our community's heritage, natural beauty, people, and our well-being. Please do not let this go through. Let's keep Saluda River of Corn, just that, not a river of black. Save Saluda and pray for our lands. Please do not pass this.
I know you like what you're hearing in the applause, but it's really slowing down on either side, the amount of people we get to speak. And I really want to get through as many people as we can. So if we could, let's just, and really quick, if you want to do a clap, but let's just, I want to hear everybody. And the faster I can hear them, the better off we're going to be, or the board. The next person.
Brenda Bonds. Vince, I'm sorry. Hello? Hello? Is it working?
Yeah.
Hi, Janice Weber, 1618 Oak Hill Drive, Madison. I don't have a statement to read. I have more questions. I know I'm not supposed to address them to Orion, so I'm going to address them to you. And I tried to keep the UDO standards in mind. Things that are detrimental to the public, things that are interest to other properties, things that affect utilities. I've heard a lot about how the project will look when it's finished. I haven't heard a lot about while it's in development. And I think maybe that is the piece that's going to affect most people directly. Do we know how much from, like, when they enter the property with the first big equipment to level the ground to finish, how long are we talking? 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? How long is this construction phase? I'm concerned about the removal of trees and wetlands, and I was glad to hear in the Orion presentation that there are plans to keep a lot of the woodlands, but do we know how many trees are going to be removed? I'm concerned about the roads, the traffic during this construction phase. How many semis carrying big equipment and posts and solar panels are there going to be on our highways and our county roads? What kind of damage are they going to be doing to the roads that will have to be fixed at some point? How much trouble are the school buses going to have to get children because they have to work around all of this construction? Are people going to have trouble getting to work because they're going to have to plan to spend 2 hours on the road to avoid all of the traffic? I've watched some of the things on the internet that have happened to other people with other projects. So the Orion project may be different, but we heard a story about, again, during the construction phase, a neighbor to the project had a lot of debris wash into their property, into their creek, to the point where the creek was filled with debris. I'm concerned that something like that could happen, and what's the plan for if that happens? How is Orion going to prevent it from happening? If it does happen, what kind of help is somebody going to be to the property next door that's not part of the project that has this issue? Another issue, and I think it was in Indiana, when they started driving the posts in a homeowner's well, the water turned dark, they tested, it was full of bacteria, they could not use the well. So here's this young family, they've got a baby and a toddler, they have no well water on their property, they're not part of the project. Nobody was helping them out. Last I heard, somebody brought them some bottled water. So what's the plan if something like that happens? I think it's something that we need to think about. When we think about impacts to the community, who is going to help people if that would happen? I know it's not part of the plan, you don't want it to happen, but if it happens, who's going to be there to help? I've seen pictures of the panels in Texas after a severe hailstorm. If we do have a catastrophic event, like a large number of the panels are destroyed by hail or tornado, which we have in this area, if the panels are no longer producing, does that trigger the decommission? So that the decommission money would be used to clear up the property? That's just something that I thought about, that I wondered. And then the substation that they have, I've heard stories, multiple stories of the substations catching fire, having toxic fumes going for days. Our volunteer fire departments, I'm sure, aren't equipped to handle toxic fumes. I know in California, they had to evacuate the neighbors for days. I just wanted to know if we have a plan for something like that, if that were to happen. So that were my questions to think about. Thank you, I appreciate your attention.
Still in? It should be all the way up.
Okay, it's on. Okay, I want to address what I'm thinking about.
Name and address.
I'm Dale Sides, and I live on the other side of the county, but by Brushy Fork Creek, where we had the disaster there a few years, a few years ago.
And hold on, Mike, check his mic.
Yeah, because it's red lights going on there. Okay, oh, there we go.
There you go.
And, like, Olivia was saying, a lot of that is wetlands. And that's what they're calling, private drain. I'm doing a little research. That's a Palestine, wetland habitats. And those habitats themselves address a lot of things these guys was talking about, which is the water quality. They filter out all the stuff, and then the flood control, the wetlands help on that. And I also found out that the nature preserve right next to it, it's the Palestine wetlands, and it's got a lot of endangered species in it. So they start draining the wetlands, and what happens to all the endangered species? They're gone forever, and that's something, you don't want to do something, be gone forever. And then a lot of that for the wetlands also is erosion control. And the number one concern in Jefferson County and the resource concern sheets we fill out is erosion. That's been the number one issue in forever for CRP. And when they strip all that ground off and leave it sitting, like she said a while ago, for all that time, while they're developing, what happens? Like if we have an event like we had out on Brushy Fork, and we get without bridges for over a year, and that's still not running. And that's with all the protections of the land and stuff, slowing all the velocities down. When the land strip, there's nothing to stop it. There's nothing to slow it down. The wetlands, nothing, it just goes. And that's a main concern. In the wetlands, they also, she said like 70% of the project, well, they don't do all the carbon sequestering also. So that's a big thing that need to be thought about. You know, why tear something up to get something? And talking about the warm season grasses and the pollinators, well, in the past, they take 3 years to establish. So they're gonna have 3 years and they're gonna have erosion problems. And and with the Johnson grass down there, like you guys noted, that's gonna be a problem. And they're gonna be really, really hard to establish anything in there with the Johnson grass. And I just think that all that makes it a bad spot for solar farm. But with the constant spraying, well, you know, unfortunately spraying and farming, that keeps the Johnson grass and invasives in control. But when left alone, it's gonna run rampant. Thank you.
Good job.
Good evening, my name is Brenda Benz. I currently live on 533 West, about a mile from one of the proposed solar farm sites on Deputy Pike. My husband and I were born here in Jefferson County and are lifelong residents. The term solar farm disturbs me. The definition of farm from Webster's dictionary states a tract of land devoted to agricultural purposes for the raising of crops, livestock, or the artificial cultivation of some aquatic life forms. Indiana code defines farm as land is considered agriculture if used for growing crops like fruits, vegetables, grains, and forage, raising livestock or poultry, timber production, pasture land, nursery stock, horticultural operations, beekeeping, apiary productions, and tobacco. Law and code also states industrial construction includes the construction of power plants, refineries, manufacturing plants, and solar and wind energy production. Agriculture or farming is overseen by U.S. Department of Agriculture. Solar energy production is overseen by federal and state energy regulatory commissions, two unrelated separate departments overseeing two unrelated separate areas of operation. Therefore, I conclude that solar production acreage is not farm or agriculture, but is industrial, and should be considered as such for zoning and regulating purposes. Indiana's agricultural canon, Indiana Code 15-11-2-6 states that the state's policy is to protect and encourage the development of agriculture, agricultural business, and agricultural land. We're looking at the protection aspect, and all of these protections point to the points on the BZA Bowman public hearing. When looking at the protection aspect, the U.S. is losing, on average since 2015, 1.8 million acres per year of agricultural land to development. At this rate, at what point will we not be able to feed ourselves, let alone the other countries we feed around this world which do not produce crops? Solar sites produce heat. I don't care what Oregon says. They have their own personal interests. I've looked at study after study. It's been proved in study after study that this constant heat dries up the underground aquifers, rendering the soil moisture levels unable to sustain crops for production as it was prior to the building of the solar site. This alteration of these aquifers also has an adverse effect on land and waterways in proximity of the solar sites. It has not yet been determined if this will be a permanent condition, an alteration after decommission, and if not, how long it will take to return the soil moisture to its proper pre-solar condition. Once a solar site is decommissioned, the soil has drastically been altered. Soil compaction is a big issue due to all the large equipment used to build and then to take down and decommission all the structures. It has been proved that it would take at least 3 years with proper deep ripping of the soil, which cost the farmers to offset the compaction that has taken place. And during those 3 years, there's a 20 to 40% reduction of crop productivity. Can you afford that? Another problem after decommission is heavy metal contamination of the soil. Zinc from the metal frame piling and cadmium from the decaying of the panels. These panels do decay, that's why they have a limited life. And anything that decays gives off something. These give off cadmium. To what extent and how long this contamination will be an issue has not yet been determined because this is a new industry. Are you aware that water contamination also takes place? During these decay, it runs off in as they wash or clean the panels, it runs off in natural precipitation. And during the life of the active production, this has all taken place. There have been lawsuits filed in several states due to the contamination from PFAS. Those are those chemicals that are here forever. We don't get rid of them. And the companies have settled. Why did they settle? They didn't want to go to judgment because they knew they were going to lose and the judgment against them would possibly be more than what they agreed to settle to. With all this said, how can one justify using good agricultural land as a solar site when you look at all the adverse effects on the soil, when under Indiana code, we are to protect our agricultural land? Even the Iowa researcher, Scott Thelman, stated that we should not be using our nation's agricultural land for solar energy production. Another issue I have with the statements made by the Orion is a recommended distance from the solar site to the residential site. I looked this up on their website. It says that the safe recommendation is 0.12 to 0.13 miles from a residential site. I would like to, and everywhere else, Irish Solar, Florida Solar said that the recommended distance should be 1.8 miles. Show me anywhere in Jefferson County on any of these proposed sites where there is not a resident within 1.8 miles of these solar fields. There isn't. Another issue with solar weather pattern alteration. I heard some of them laugh about it, but there have been studies made to that effect. It's been proven that the heat generation from solar sites and the flat panels create wind turbulence, wind shears, and can cause small spin-up tornadoes in certain areas, especially those in valleys. Where are we? Ohio River Valley. Another issue, tax revenue. Solar companies tout large revenues will be gained by local government through taxes on a solar site. These companies will apply for tax abatements. They've already said they will, meaning they will pay significantly lower or no tax at all. Not only that, it has been proven that neighboring property values will decline in several studies, thus resulting in lower assessments on these properties. Larry DeBoer, a professor of agricultural economics at Purdue University, points out that the loss of revenue from tax abatements and lower neighboring property values would likely result in less taxes collected by local governments. This is by a professor of economics, not somebody that was paid by Orion. Let's look at efficiency ratings. Geothermal, 300 to 400% efficient. Nuclear, 33 to 37. Coal, 32 to 33. Wind, 20 to 40. Solar, 20 at best. Yay. In conclusion, why would anyone even consider solar power or allow it to be established? And I don't care what the solar companies promise you. We lived through Marble Hill. Look what they promised.
Thank you. All right, we reached our time limit.
I wonder why.
At 9 o'clock, so we will, I'll accept motion from the board to table this till our next meeting, which is November the 7th at 5 o'clock at this location.
Taylor, is that Taylor, that's a Thursday? Is it the 6th or the 7th?
No, we gotta do it the 7th because we gotta have a facility.
Okay, that, it's not on your calendar, it's the 6th, okay. It's fine. I just want to make sure.
Meeting's not over. Someone's in charge of listen, please.
Wait a minute. I want you to be completely informed of what we're doing so you're not surprised. So the meeting, as it's stated on our agenda, is the 6th. Well, we couldn't get this on the 6th because the election's on the 5th, so we moved it to the 6th on the agenda, or not agenda, on our calendar. But we couldn't get this facility, so we moved it to the 7th. so we can have this facility, so we can make sure we can get as many people in one place as possible. So that is why it is getting moved. So if you look at the calendar, it will say the 6th, but it is the 7th as indicated in the motion that we have in the second. All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Now a motion to adjourn.
Will there be a time limit on speaking parts
All
for the
in
next meeting?
favor, say aye. Thank you.
You're gonna pick up on the list where we left off, or is there gonna be a new list?
No, we'll pick up where we left off, and then we'll add our addition for people that weren't here tonight.